Chapter 833. Green City, the Shaman Temple. Several dozen shaman priests were surrounding an altar for a ceremony. The shaman religion originated from the savage highlands. The religion's believers were mainly spirit beasts, orcs, and trolls, believing in the shaman god and the sorcerer god. The Green City shaman religion had existed several hundred years ago. At that time, the gnomes' green religion was still very strong, so the shaman religion did not have much development. Several decades ago, the gnomes experienced several wars and quickly weakened, so the shaman religion welcomed an opportunity to develop in the Green City area. Several decades ago, the savage highlands sent High Priest Mars to Green City, and Mars was in charge of the development of Green City. Because High Priest Mars was very strong and adding in the resources of the savage highlands, the shaman religion in Green City had expanded by several dozen times in just a few decades. Now, there were several tens of thousands of shaman sorcerers in Green City. The several tens of thousands of shaman sorcerers were all very dangerous characters, and there were over 100 shaman sorcerers who had obtained the surrender of the shaman priests. If a shaman sorcerer wanted to become a shaman priest, not only did they need to be at the true spirit realm, they also needed to practice their witchcraft to perfection. Just like this, the shaman religion had gained a foothold in Green City. The high priest led the several tens of thousands of shaman sorcerers through mediation with the gnomes, obtaining the qualifications to build a temple in Green City. Then they spread to the surrounding tribes, and now the number of shaman religion believers in the forest had reached several 100,000. This was a power that could threaten the green religion. At this moment, there were over 2,000 strong figures that were densely packed together in the shaman temple. They didn't move at all like statues, and each of them released a terrifying aura. They were definitely strong characters in the forest. They were already not people. These fellows were covered in the shaman religion's runes, just like a giant painted human. From their feet to their legs to their bodies, from their head to their chest to their fingers, they were completely covered. A strong curse and witchcraft energy was being released from these people's bodies. Voodoo puppets. These were puppets refined from an extremely cruel witchcraft technique. The shaman sorcerers sang and danced around the voodoo puppets for a while before suddenly gently pulling the voodoo puppets' hair. In the end, their scalps and skulls were pulled out, just like opening a lid, but these voodoo puppets did not move at all. The brains of each voodoo puppet had long been hollowed out. The shaman sorcerer grabbed a large pile of insects, which looked like thousands of centipedes or earthworms entangled together. They were still wriggling and were all stuffed into the empty skulls of the voodoo puppets. Each insect was a witchcraft that the shaman sorcerer had spent a lot of effort to refine. When these insects containing powerful witchcraft power were stuffed into the voodoo puppets' brains, the shaman sorcerer immediately covered the skulls and then began to dance and sing. On the shaman altar, a white-haired old troll raised his hands high. A thick and vigorous energy revolved around the shaman temple. Great shaman god and sorcerer god, please accept the sacrifice of your servants and grant the voodoo puppets great power. A strong light burst out from the altar and finally turned into thousands of light beams that landed on the voodoo puppets. The insects that were wriggling in the skulls instantly became several times more active and continued to drill into the voodoo puppets' bodies. There were insects crawling under the skin of each voodoo puppet, and the light from the shaman runes on their bodies became even more intense. Finally, the thing that had been motionless like a statue was awakened. Their originally empty eyes suddenly had eyeballs and spirit. They all knelt on the ground on one knee and said in a low voice, "Long live the shaman." The 2,000 voodoo puppets that the shaman sorcerer had carefully refined were finally awakened. These puppets were not ordinary puppets, other than the fact that they were enchanted with all kinds of witchcraft and curses from head to toe, which gave each of them a terrifying combat strength. Their bodies were almost immortal. They were not afraid of fire, water, acid, or cutting. They even had simple thinking abilities. They could be said to be perfect puppet warriors. The time has come. A white-haired old troll opened his eyes and revealed a pair of sparkling eyes. This battle will turn Green City into ruins. This was the shaman high priest Mars from the Savage Highlands. He was an old troll with unfathomable witchcraft and was already over 150 years old this year. Mars called out in a low voice, "Lose." "High priest, what orders do you have?" A green-skinned orc walked in front of Mars. Luz was an orc shaman, and although he was young, his attainments in witchcraft were very shocking. Luz's witchcraft was second only to Mars. Therefore, he had a very high position in the Greenland shaman religion. He was basically the second in command and was also Mars' assistant. Mars looked at his assistant and said, "How are the preparations of the troops outside?" Lurtz replied, "When the tribes start to attack, the shaman army will also start to attack. With our help from the inside, this battle is almost certain. We can't be careless. Although the gnomes are weak, no one knows what trump cards they have." Mars said in a deep voice, "The gnomes have submitted to the eternal forest, so we don't have much time left. We can use the chess pieces we buried among the gnomes. Go and wake them up." "Yes, High Priest." Luz brought several shaman sorcerers to a secluded cliff and began to use witchcraft, activating the chess pieces the shamans had buried among the gnomes over the past few years. These chess pieces have been unknowingly infected by the shaman's brain controlling witchcraft. The goo had already parasitized the brains of the gnomes, and as long as the shamans did not activate it, the gnomes would return to normal. Now is the time to use these chess pieces. Luz and the shaman sorcerers began chanting and immediately felt the existence of the witchcraft. They were all activated, allowing the witchcraft to take over their thoughts, making these gnomes come here to meet him. The sorcerers could send simple messages to the witchcraft, like calling them over. But those complex commands couldn't be directly sent. The shaman sorcerers had to bring the host to their side and send detailed instructions to the host. After around 20 minutes, 5 gnomes appeared here. These were the 5 gnomes controlled by the shaman sorcerers. They were all high-level gnomes, and as long as they could control these gnomes, they could open the barrier at the critical moment and turn off the green protectors. This would paralyze Green City's defenses and increase the shaman religion's chances of winning by at least 20%. "Let's begin." Luz waved his hand. The 5 shaman sorcerers walked over to the 5 gnomes. They were prepared to control them and send out instructions. Suddenly, the 5 gnomes made a move at almost the same time. Poisonous vines shot out from the ground and instantly wrapped around the 5 defenseless shaman sorcerers. Finally, a vine pierced through their bodies. "What?" Luz was shocked. Before he could figure out what was happening, the surrounding grass was suddenly bestowed with some kind of power, and a low voice echoed in his ears. "God of nature above, please bestow the vitality of a giant dragon upon all living beings." This was the Green Religion's giant dragon power technique. It was definitely a high-level technique. There were less than 10 people in Green City that could use this move. Luz could no longer run. The originally soft grass suddenly expanded, and in an instant he was wrapped up like a huge rice dumpling. After being infused with nature's power, each blade of grass became harder than steel and had a terrifying strength. As long as the other side was willing, even an earth dragon could be turned into minced meat. The power released from the grass could even suppress Luz's spirit energy, making him lose the ability to resist. Clark put down his staff and gave a cold laugh. "You never thought it would happen. It's you." Luz looked at Clark and then at the 5 dead sorcerers before looking at the 5 normal gnomes. He could clearly feel that the voodoo goo were in the gnomes' brains, but he didn't know why he couldn't activate them. At this time, there was a handsome human youth that was leading a charming Fox clan member, walking out from behind Clark. Demonic god priest? Luz couldn't understand why a priest of such a weak sect would appear here. Dolores revealed a tender smile. "Sir City Lord truly has a divine foresight. Not only did you catch him, you also caught the second in command of the shaman religion. Strange. How did you know that Mars would send this fellow?" Making the gnome puppet remove Green City's defenses is a very important task. If I was that high priest, I would have sent the most capable person to do it. How do we deal with this person? I think it's better to just kill him. Dolores's words made Luz's expression change. She continued to say, "This fellow's position in the shaman religion is not low. If we can kill him, not only will it decrease the shaman religion's strength, it will also greatly affect their morale." Clark also thought this way. Luz's shaman witchcraft was only inferior to Mars. He could easily kill him with a sneak attack, otherwise it would not have been so easy to subdue him. Chu Tian shook his head as he walked in front of Luz. "Priest Luz, your father has always been a local shaman. Your father was the leader of the shamans before Mars came. Am I right? So what? If there was no Mars, you would have inherited your father's legacy and become the local shaman leader." Chu Tian's meaning was very clear. The shamans are independent. So why do you listen to Mars and become a puppet and chess piece of the Savage Highlands? Luz gave a cold laugh. "Don't you think this method of sowing discord is too laughable? I think you need to understand something first. I'm not trying to drive a wedge between you, and actually eradicating a trivial shaman religion is not a hard matter for me. So I don't need to use this method. I just feel that it is a pity for the shamans to disappear from Green City. After all, the shaman witchcraft still has a bit of use." Luz's expression became strange. This fellow's tone was very light, like he did not place the local shaman religion in his eyes at all. Mars was a shaman sent by the Savage Highlands, and he had directly taken orders from the Savage Highlands, so there was no possibility of peace talks. The only one he could use was Luz. Chu Tian then said, "First let me introduce myself. I am the Elven King's Eternal City, Lord of Green City, and this place will become my territory. I'll give you two choices now. The first is to turn to ashes with the shamans, or the second is to join hands with me to defeat Mars. I'll make you the leader of the local shamans, giving you protection and freedom. I'll allow the shamans to become a member of Green City and allow you to develop in Green City. Why would the Eternal Forest send a human to be the city lord?" Luz looked at Clark beside him. Although Clark's expression was a bit complicated, it seemed to confirm his words. "I don't know much about curses or witchcraft, but I have a bit of confidence in my alchemy skills." Chu Tian took out a pill and forcefully shoved it into Luz's mouth. "This pill will take effect in 3 days, causing your entire body to corrode, finally causing you to dissolve and die. Don't have any wishful thinking. No one in the Forest of Chaos can cure this pill. I believe you're a smart person, and a smart person should know how to make a smart choice. I have at least 10 ways to destroy you. Even if Green City can't destroy you, are you willing to be ordered around by the Savage Highlands and become a pawn that can be sacrificed at any time? I've already said this. You could decide for yourself." Chu Tian waved his hand at Clark, and Clark removed the bindings. Chu Tian didn't even look at him, and immediately left with Clark and Dolores. Damn! Luz could feel that there was a medicinal energy that had spread to every cell in his body in just a few seconds. He had never seen such a powerful poison that could hide itself. The human was not lying, and it would be hard to find someone who could cure this poison in the Forest of Chaos. Not to mention that the incubation period was only 3 days. This also meant that if he didn't make a choice in 3 days, he would be dead for sure. Damn, he had fallen to this point because of a moment of carelessness. Where did that mysterious human come from? From their appearance, it seemed like they did not place the shaman religion in their eyes. When Luz returned to the shaman temple, High Priest Urs looked at him. Has the chess piece been arranged? Chapter 834. Mars's cultivation was higher than Luz's, so this kind of sneak attack wouldn't work normally. But Marzu had consumed a lot of energy and was not on guard against Luz, so Luz's sneak attack was successful. Luz was a fierce and decisive person. Since he had decided to kill the High Priest, of course he would not show any mercy. The 7-tailed centipede he had refined could kill anyone here with a single bite, but it could not kill this fellow in front of him. When the centipede bit Marzu, Luz's palms came out, slamming into Marzu's chest. Although the shaman sorcerer could not cultivate normal cultivation techniques, with Luz's true spirit realm cultivation, just releasing his spirit energy was enough to create a strong destructive might. Marzu's ribs shattered, and he spat out a large mouthful of blood. Like a broken glass person, he was instantly sent flying, slamming into an altar and causing the altar to cave in. High Priest, The shaman sorcerers' faces fell as they stared at Luz, who had sneak attacked Marzu. The shaman priests by Luz's side stood up, looking like they were blocking these sorcerers for Luz. A shaman priest roared out with a face filled with anger and confusion. In front of a great enemy. What do you mean by this? What do I mean? I want to ask him what Marza means by this. Luz walked forward with a dark expression. None of the shamans dared block him. Attack Green City? This is a method of mutual destruction, but you want to drive us into a pit of fire. Even if we win, what meaning does a ruined Green City have to us? Even if we win, can we withstand the anger of the eternal forest? The Savage Highlands are merely treating us as dispensable chess pieces. Could it be that you're willing to be manipulated like this? The shaman sorcerers had ugly expressions on their faces. Luz shouted, I have already discussed the conditions with the new Green City Lord. As long as we leave the Savage Highlands, the shamans can still live here and we will receive Green City's protection. Perhaps our influence will greatly decrease, but at least we will be free. The shaman religion was divided into two factions. One was the Highland shamans represented by Marzu, and the other was the Green City shamans represented by Luz. Both sides were in a standoff. Jia. A human figure came out of the hole in the altar. He had a head of white hair, and his body was covered in blood, looking like a terrifying demon. His skin was already festering, and there was poisonous blood flowing out. It was clear he was deeply poisoned. What a good traitor. Without a Highland religion, where would the Green City shamans come from? Today we'll eliminate you, traitor, and clean up our sect. The priest by Luz's side had a large change in expression. This old fellow had been hit by Luz's seven-tailed centipede and had taken 2 full force palms from Luz without any defenses, yet he didn't die. The high priest's strength was higher than most people imagined. Marzu saw Luz's ugly expression and immediately gave an insolent laugh. Are you surprised? You haven't learned all of the Highland shaman's methods. While he was speaking, Marzu spat out several bugs. Each one was as round as a leech, but they were not moving at all. Their bodies were purple and black, releasing a poisonous gas. Not long later, they turned into a pool of poisonous blood, corroding a large piece of the floor. The other shaman sorcerers instantly understood. The high priest had placed a voodoo in his body, and these voodoo bugs were parasitic in his body. When Luz's seven-tailed centipede bit the high priest, these voodoo bugs sucked away most of the voodoo curse and poison. Therefore, the high priest's injuries were not light, but they were not fatal. Luz felt this was bad, but he would not collapse. Luz was very clear on his seven-tailed centipede's strength. Although the high priest had dissolved most of the poison with his witchcraft, there was still a small portion left in his body. Adding in the injuries from Mars's 2 palms, he would not be able to recover so easily. Then let me experience the Highland shaman's witchcraft. Luz's source spirit was completely released. It was gray in color, and after condensing, it turned into a fierce-looking puppet. This puppet had small eyes and a mouth that reached the back of its ears. There were bugs drilling in its 7 orifices, making it look very fierce and terrifying. Each shaman's source spirit was like this. This was similar to the giant shark gang members in the southern summer country. When the giant shark gang members were baptized by the sea race's inheritance, their source spirits would turn into giant sharks. When a shaman sorcerer became a shaman sorcerer, their source spirits would also change. It was this kind of sorcerer puppet. The shaman priest's witchcraft energy came from this source spirit puppet. Mars also released a sorcerer puppet. His source spirit was clearly much stronger, and the sorcerer puppet instantly shot out a tooth from its finger. This tooth was not big and looked like a human tooth. The surface was covered in witchcraft runes, and the sorcerer puppet's power shot out, leaving behind an almost invisible gray shadow. The tooth contained a fatal witchcraft energy, and Luz quickly dodged it. A shaman sorcerer standing in a straight line was hit instead of him, but it was like a drop of water falling on him. The tooth actually disappeared without a trace. Almost in the next second, the sorcerer gave a pitiful cry. He spat out a large mouthful of blood, or more accurately, he didn't spit out, but rather escaped. Most of the blood in his body escaped from his mouth, eyes, and nostrils. His eyeballs, brain, heart, and organs all sprayed out. This shaman sorcerer instantly turned into a dried-up corpse as he fell to the ground. Luz's sleeve shook a few times, and 6-7 beetles came out of his palm, finally forming a small ball the size of half a fist. This time it was Marzu's turn to quickly dodge. The insect ball Luz threw hit the wall and exploded. The entire shaman temple shook a few times, and the insect ball sprayed out a large amount of blood, leaving a giant mark on the wall. Only SOSO. Marzu gave a cold laugh. In terms of shaman witchcraft, although Luz was second to Marzu, the difference in cultivation base was too large. This was not something that could be easily dealt with. Marzu believed that he had at least a 70% chance of winning. There was no time. The 7-tailed centipede's poison was still spreading in his body. After Marzu suppressed the poison, his face became darker and darker. The priest's robes on his body began to tremble without any wind, and a strong witchcraft energy leaked out of the 7 orifices of his source spirit, revolving around him like a whirlwind. Everyone could feel Marzu's intentions. He decided to use his witchcraft to take care of Luz in one go. But this time, something that no one could have imagined happened. A vine suddenly pierced through the wall and instantly pierced through Marzu's back, coming out of his chest. The blood-stained vine continued to pierce through a pillar, and his heart and lungs were instantly torn apart. Marzu was sent flying by a large force. His eyes were wide open, and his face was filled with disbelief. How is this possible? How could the temple be broken so easily? When Marzu saw that the vine had pierced through the wall, it was right in the middle of Luz's insect ball exploding blood. He suddenly understood something. The insect ball's target, perhaps it wasn't him. The blood that sprayed out contained a large amount of witchcraft energy. It was like a strong acid being splashed on the wall, quickly softening the temple's wall. Finally, it corroded a large hole, and at the same time, it weakened the defense of the temple from the inside. The gnome's vines had already wrapped the temple into a large dumpling, so they could definitely feel the defense of this area weakening. Clark had directly cut through the wall, killing the troublesome Marzu in one move. Don't think you'll have an easy time even if I die. You'll all die with me. Marzu's tall figure moved a few times, and his head of gray hair suddenly turned scarlet red. His skin was covered in small bumps, like there were many insects moving in his body. Moreover, there were more and more of them, becoming larger and larger. In just a few seconds, he had turned into a balloon filled with air. This is bad. He's going to self-destruct. Quickly run. The shaman sorcerers cried out in fear as they ran away. Marzu's body released a thunderous sound, and the entire hall was covered in a layer of blood red. This was the power of Marzu's lifetime of sorcery, and it contained an extremely powerful curse power. Some of the shaman sorcerers who were too slow were hit by it. Their bodies immediately went out of control and swelled up like Marzu before exploding like balloons, turning into a large wave of blood-red energy. This energy splashed on other people's bodies and caused a huge explosion. This was no longer self-destructing. Marzu had used one person to self-destruct to cause tens of people to explode. If this move was used in the center of the city, where there were the most people, it could probably blow up the entire city into a wasteland in minutes. Luz had just escaped with a small portion of the sorcerers when the temple was already a sea of blood. Clark immediately raised his hand when he saw this. Quickly seal the shaman temple. Don't let the power leak out. The green religion priests all made a move. Vines stacked on top of each other, finally forming a giant semicircle on the ground. The vine stacked on top of each other was several feet thick and contained a powerful sealing energy. Even if there was a powerful explosion inside, this energy would not leak out even a bit. Powerful, truly powerful. Dolores patted her full chest. That old thing is truly sinister. It's a good thing we didn't participate in the battle. Otherwise, we would have suffered a large loss. The shaman high priest is dead and the battle is over. Let's go over. When Chu Tian brought Dolores over, The gnomes had already begun to clean up the battlefield. Luz and the several dozen surviving shaman sorcerers had been captured by the gnomes and were waiting to be dealt with. Luz immediately shouted when he saw Chu Tian, "Sir City Lord, I've already done as you said." Chu Tian waved his hand at the gnomes, indicating for them to be released. The gnomes, of course, did not immediately follow and first asked for Clark's opinion. Clark had no other choice. The gnomes could easily win mainly because of Chu Tian, so he could only wave his hand, let them go. Chu Tian threw the antidote to Luz. "You've made the right choice. Now we'll end this battle without any benefits. I think you don't want all the shaman believers to die in this chaos." Luz nodded. This battle had already caused the shaman sorcerers heavy losses. If all of the shaman's followers died, without any new blood to replenish them, the shaman religion might really be unable to recover from this setback. This battle had no meaning. The shaman religion had already suffered a crushing defeat, and there was no chance of a comeback. Chapter 835. Luz did not know why. When he saw that young human, he had a bad premonition in his heart. What made him make this decision was not the poison in his body, but rather the methods of that human. He could break witchcraft. The 5 gnomes had clearly been controlled by the witchcraft, but the witchcraft was still in their minds, so the shaman sorcerer had lost control of them. This made Luz feel very uneasy. The shaman sorcerer's witchcraft curse could not be broken. This was where the shaman sorcerer's confidence came from. Now the truth was in front of him. Not only had the witchcraft been broken, he had also seen through the shaman religion's plan. The gnome Clark was already making preparations. Like this, the shamans were in a disadvantageous position. This battle that they had a 90% chance of winning had been reduced by at least half. Luz's ancestors had come to the Green City area, and he had been a native shaman since his father's generation, so he did not have much contact with the Savage Highlands. If it wasn't for the Savage Highlands sending High Priest Mars, the two of them would have become 2 different powers. This was something that the human had calculated very accurately. Although Mars had absolute authority in the religion and all the shaman priests had to listen to him, the local shaman sorcerers made up the majority of the Greenland shamans. Rather than saying they were afraid of High Priest Mars, it would be better to say they were afraid of the giant hidden in the Savage Highlands. When the Savage Highlands were enraged, the little Greenland shamans were not worth mentioning at all. Due to the fear of this giant, the Greenland shamans had no choice but to accept Mars' leadership, becoming a power placed in Green City by the Savage Highlands. If it went according to normal development, the shaman sorcerers would continue to erode the gnomes and finally control Green City. Who would have thought that the gnomes would suddenly rely on the Eternal Forest? This made the Savage Highlands very angry. In order to prevent the Eternal Forest from controlling the city, they decided to destroy Green City. The Greenland Shaman's Foundation was in Green City, so without Green City, they would be greatly affected. The gnomes were not weak, so if they went all out against the gnomes, the shamans would have to pay a heavy price. Not to mention that Green City already belonged to the Eternal Forest. The strength of the elves was not something the shamans could imagine. Luz could already vaguely feel that they had become a chess piece in the game between the forest giants. A chess piece used to test the Eternal Forest bottom line. A chess piece that could be sacrificed at any time. Luz made his decision after thinking for a long time. He said to the shaman sorcerers beside him, "Have Priest Carell and Hilton come over. I have something to discuss with them." Priest Carell and Hilton were Luz's trusted aides and were the main leaders of the Greenland shamans, so he had to discuss this matter with them. After Chu Tian brought Dolores and Clark away from Luz, Clark said in a slightly worried voice, "You're letting Luz go like this? He is not a character that is easy to control. It was hard for us to regain a bit of initiative, so if Urs notices this, perhaps Green City will fall into a disadvantageous situation." Clark now had a whole new level of respect for this young man. Chu Tian had only been in the Green City area for a week, and he had only studied the situation of the large powers and the information of their main members before arranging today's plan. It was bold and radical. If it succeeded, it would greatly reduce the pressure, but if it failed, Green City would lose the initiative. This was because once the shaman sorcerers noticed it, the gnomes would find it hard to carry out their plans and actions. Damn, that damn old gnome, he actually doesn't believe me? Chu Tian's face was filled with disdain as he said to Dolores beside him, "Do you believe me? Sir City Lord has broken the shaman's witchcraft. This has dealt a large psychological blow to Luz and made him doubt the effectiveness of the shaman's witchcraft. The poison that Sir City Lord has given him is a threat to Luz's survival. There is no one in this world that is willing to die." Dolores seemed like she had already thought it through. The most important thing is that Sir City Lord has cleverly used the shaman sorcerer's internal differences, especially the Highland shamans represented by Mars and the Green City shamans represented by Luz. This relationship is not obvious normally, but in this special time, there are many things that can be done. So I think this plan can be tried. Chu Tian said with a nod, "After I become the City Lord, you will be the City Lord's assistant." Dolores revealed a look of joy as she immediately thanked him. Clark was very embarrassed on the side. This human already treated the City Lord's position as his, which made him feel a bit uncomfortable. Even if this human had some skills, humans were still humans in the end, and gnomes would not be convinced by humans. What should we do now? The shamans have pretty much been dealt with. We need to guard against other powers that try to fish in troubled waters. According to what I know, other than the shamans, the most troublesome ones in Green City are the undead religion and the druid religion. That's right. Clark's expression became serious again. Although he was a bit unconvinced by the human in front of him, this was related to the survival of Green City, so he did not dare be too careless. The founder of the undead religion is a lich from the Dragon's Ridge, Segister. This lich is very strange and mysterious, almost never showing himself. Even the necromancer priests under him are very strange, so we can't predict their movements like the shamans. It's simply impossible to guard against them. What about the druids? The druids are different from the shamans and the undead. The druid religion is a very loose but widely spread religion in the Forest of Chaos. The druids gathered around Green City should not have any background, but they are unruly and don't listen to discipline, turning a blind eye to Green City's rules. They have been doing things their own way for a long time, which gives me a headache. It's like this. The gnomes really didn't have any prospects. A good city was actually turned into this by these foreign powers. It was no wonder they had to rely on the eternal forest. Dolores asked, "Our main enemy this time is the shamans. Although we can't rule out the undead and druids taking advantage of the chaos, if we make plans against them at the same time, I'm afraid it will scatter our energy and it will be disadvantageous to the overall situation." You're right. Chu Tian did not plan on eliminating them all at once. After all, with Green City's current strength, it was not enough to fight one against three. He asked Clark, "How many green protectors does Green City have?" There are over 3,000 in total, with 2,000 being weakened by a strange disease. The rest need to guard the passages and passes, so I'm afraid there is no way to transfer them. Strange disease? Chu Tian slightly knit his brows. Take me to have a look. Clark brought Chu Tian to an open-air temple in Green City. This was one of the places where the green protectors were cultivated. There were several hundred green protector saplings that were currently growing under the light of the green altar. Other than that, there were several hundred giant green protectors that had been moved here. They were all complete, but they could no longer be used. The green protector was a very powerful synthetic life form. It was created by the gnomes from the ancient war trees and was controlled by the green religion's priests. It could be considered one of the gnomes' greatest inventions. Each green protector could be used for 1,000 years. When Green City was at its peak 200-300 years ago, there were around 20,000 green protectors, which was enough to cover the entire territory, making it impossible for outsiders to invade. Now, there were less than 3,000 green protectors, and 2,000 of them were sick. Otherwise, how could the shamans have this much courage? There was a spring of life in the center of the temple. This was not normal spring of life. It was something the green religion priests had blessed and refined with the power of nature. Each drop was equivalent to a barrel of spring of life water. So it was definitely a priceless treasure that had a very good effect on recovering injuries. These green protectors with strange diseases were now in a bad state. They were like dying trees with withered leaves. Although the gnomes did not hesitate to use the extremely pure spring of life water to water them, it could only slow down the speed of their death, and there were no signs of it turning for the better. Sir Clark, why did you bring a human here? This is my clan's important place, and it hides our clan's secrets. How can we let a human spy on us? No matter where he went, he wouldn't be welcomed as a human. The gnome priests all looked at him with hostile gazes. Chu Tian was too lazy to care about them, as he used his divine sense to enter the green protector's body. He could vaguely feel that the green protector was filled with a strange energy, and it was this energy that was suppressing the green protector's vitality like a seal. Clark comforted the other gnomes, telling them not to be impatient. Since they didn't have any hope, why not let this fellow try? The gnomes were very knowledgeable. If any gnome priest was placed in the human world, they would at least be great scholars or even scholars with the title of Kingdom Scholar. At least in this forest, there was no group more knowledgeable than the Green Forest Gnomes. Even this much intelligence couldn't solve this problem. Perhaps they would have to invite a sage to solve it, and it would have to be a sage specializing in plants and life. Such a young human. How could he be a human-titled sage? The gnome's eyes were filled with disdain and disdain. Chu Tian withdrew his hand. This is a slow death energy curse. I think it was done by a lich. This fits their style. Dolores asked in a curious voice, is there a way to cure them? There is, but with normal methods, it would take quite a bit of effort because these life forms have been deeply corroded by the curse. I'm afraid they won't be able to recover in a short period of time, so they won't be able to make it in time for this battle. Chu Tian hesitated for a few minutes before taking out a small bottle that was filled with a dark red liquid. He gave the bottle to Dolores. Pour this in the water of life, and then water them with the water of life. The gnomes were all stunned. What did this human want to do? Dolores was about to do this, but she was stopped by several white bearded gnomes. They looked at the fox girl and the human with wary eyes. One was a heretic, and the other was a sly human. Only the heavens knew what these two wanted to do. Clark gave a gentle cough. Let them try. There's no better way anyways. Dolores glared at the gnomes before pouring the contents of the bottle into the water of life. Almost in an instant, the entire spring water was covered in a layer of dark red, as if there was a strange energy inside. Dolores could feel the energy in this place. She looked at it with a questioning gaze. Chu Tian nodded, water them. She immediately poured the water on the half-dead green protector. An unbelievable thing happened. The moment the light red droplet landed on the green protector's body, there was a sizzling sound. Wherever the water droplet touched, the gray color disappeared, and the place it touched was filled with vitality. Those withered leaves were instantly filled with vitality. The gnomes were all stunned. What was going on? This was completely incomprehensible. Chu Tian revealed a pained expression. The divine blood could break any curse, and this spring water from the spring of life could revive the green protectors, so naturally it would have a good effect. Chu Tian did not have much divine blood on him. This thing could be used to refine powerful divine blooding corpses, so using it like this was a bit too extravagant. But the effect was immediate. Chapter 836. Green City was a forest city, and the difference between a city and a tribe was that a city was a relatively open place. There were free markets and different races, just like the large and small towns in the forest. But the city's management was stricter and more formal. Only merchant caravans or adventurers recognized by the city could come in. Green City had been managed by the gnomes for 500 years. Now there were many merchant caravans, races, and influences that had obtained residency, shop opening, and business permits. The forest city's main income came from commerce and residency taxes, so outsiders made up a large portion of Green City's residents. This storm had caused an uproar in the city, so it was impossible for others not to know about it. In the taverns and hotels, the merchants, adventurers, and gnomes were all talking about this matter. "Hey fellows, do you know?" A gnome merchant said in an exaggerated manner. Green City almost had a large battle yesterday. Another forest merchant nodded. That's right, that's right. Green City is too damn unsafe. Can we still properly do business here in the future? It's said that the surrounding forest tribes are in chaos. I think Green City is in danger, so it's better if we just leave as soon as possible. You can all be assured. A gnome in the tavern quickly explained. These merchant caravans were Green City's main source of income, so if they lost confidence in Green City, it would be a large loss to the gnomes. The crisis was caused by the shamans. Now that the shamans have been beaten half to death, they are no longer a threat. Another gnome said, Green City has already released food to the forest tribes, relieving the danger of famine for the forest tribes. Although Green City has lost quite a bit of resources, I believe that after this, the surrounding forest tribes will be even more united. Even if there are enemies in the future, we will be able to unite against them. The forest merchants all had resentful looks on their faces. Who doesn't know that your Green City is on the verge of collapse? Even if you can pass this time, can you pass next time? At this time, an adventurer who knew the inside story asked, That's right, I heard that the reason why Green City didn't suffer any large losses this time was all because of a mysterious human helping them. Otherwise, Green City would have to pay a large price to pass this crisis. How could they be unharmed like now? Is that true or false? Where did this human come from? He actually has this kind of ability. How come I've never heard of him before? A gnome scratched his head and said, My grandfather is a green religion priest, and he's seen this human before. I think he's called Chution. Anyway, he's a human that's not even 20 years old. This name was indeed unfamiliar to the forest tribes. No one had ever heard of this kind of person moving around in the forest before, so they were very shocked that Chution could solve this disaster for Green City. But it was clear that they were shocked a bit too early. At this time, an adventurer charged into the tavern. He was holding the notice given by the Green City gnomes and had a strange look on his face as he loudly shouted, Damn, something big has happened. Quickly come and look at this. Anson, what the hell are you doing? Could it be another war is about to break out? The tavern was filled with clattering sounds as the merchants all stood up and immediately went to take the notice in the adventurer's hands. They didn't know if they didn't look, but when they saw the contents, everyone's eyes almost popped out. What's written here? A person anxiously shouted, I don't know Elven language. Quickly read it out for me. This is the latest news. That human's true identity has been revealed. He is the Green City Lord appointed by the Eternal Forest's Elven King. Fuck, is that true or false? The Elven King's brain must have been damaged. Everyone broke out in curses. Everyone knew that Green City couldn't hold on any longer, but they had received secret news that the Eternal Forest was prepared to take over, so they were able to stay calm until now. As long as Green City became a city under the Eternal Forest control, with the Elven military's increase, Green City would have a chance to prosper again. In the end, the Elven King took over, but he gave the city to the human. Wasn't this a joke? If the elves did not send an army, how could a foreign human stabilize the situation? There's still more. There's still more. Green City's acting city lord Clark has already resigned. After the Green Religion's priests' research, it has been decided that the human Chu Tian will be the acting city lord. This order will take effect immediately. The human Chu Tian has already moved into the main castle and has begun to take over the Gnome City's affairs. This really was a shocking piece of news. It is like a bomb exploding in their mouths. It made people unable to close their mouths. Was this a joke? It was fine if the Eternal Forest was messing around, but now the gnomes were messing around as well. There's some news that this human was the leader of a small power on the edge of the Forest of Chaos. It said that he was a merchant from a small company, but he came to Green City alone to be the city lord. Fuck, a brat still wet behind the ears. What qualifications does he have to be Green City lord? Fuck, the gnomes can't do it. Why don't Father do it? Is Green City finished? This time it wasn't just the merchants and adventurers. It also caused a large stir among the gnomes. How could Sir Clark let a human take over as the city lord? This was just too unreasonable. Around half an hour ago, Chu Tian had just accepted the appointment. Although there was a problem with the plan, and he couldn't control the forest tribes, it didn't matter too much. The gnomes and shamans had a deep grudge against each other. The Green City shamans led by Luz could not gain the trust of the gnomes, and they could be retaliated against by the savage highlands. The most correct thing to do was to support Chu Tian as the city lord. This would ensure that the shamans would be protected by Green City and have a place to grow. The Minotaur Arnold also supported Chu Tian, and there was also the demonic god religion that Dolores belonged to. Chu Tian didn't have many cards he could use, but with this great merit, Clark still gave him the acting city lord position. Chu Tian brought Dolores to the city lord's castle. On the road, Dolores had a depressed expression. "Hey, I've successfully taken the first step. Since I've obtained the acting city lord position, I'm not far from becoming the city lord. You've also been promoted to the city lord's assistant. Shouldn't we celebrate?" Chu Tian shook the gorgeous city lord's robe that the gnomes had just made for him. For example, a passionate kiss. If it was normal times, Dolores wouldn't have suggested playing around with this human, but she wasn't in the mood right now. If this decision is announced now, it will definitely cause a large controversy among the gnomes. The Eternal Forest has appointed a human as the new city lord. This is a fact that no one can accept. Aren't you afraid of your subordinates rebelling? There was no denying it. Chu Tian was indeed a very capable human. In this conflict with the shaman sorcerers, if it wasn't for Chu Tian's skills, the gnomes would have suffered heavy losses. But he was still a human, and he hadn't fully matured yet, so now was not the time to reveal his identity. Chu Tian did not have his own influence in Green City, and the demonic god religion did not have much influence in Green City. Luz had only submitted to him due to pressure. As for the gnomes, there were a few old fellows that appreciated him, but most of the gnomes would not accept a human as the city lord. Their current method was to push Chu Tian into the heart of the struggle. It looked very glorious on the surface, but the water underneath was very deep. Chu Tian was a city lord with no followers. This identity was just a symbol. The authority was still in the gnomes' hands. Dolores said, "I think the gnomes are purposely making trouble for you. You have done a large merit, and you have indeed been recognized by the Eternal Forest, as well as received orders from the Elven King. So the gnomes will not deal with you based on their personal feelings, but the gnomes are waiting for you to make a mistake." Chu Tian was just an acting city lord with his hands tied. As long as he was not the true city lord, it meant the gnomes still had some leeway. Green City's complicated situation would not be solved because of the shaman crisis. There were still many internal and external problems that needed to be solved. Once Chu Tian became the acting city lord, the situation would become even more complicated. If Chu Tian made a mistake or caused losses, the gnomes could use this to ask the Eternal Forest to change the Elven King's orders and find an elven expert to take charge. This was giving Chu Tian a chance. This was also the gnome's strategy of advancing and retreating. No matter how big Chu Tian's merit was, deep in the gnomes' hearts, they still didn't recognize his identity. They still had doubts about his ability and status. No matter, I liked the challenge. Chu Tian walked into the gorgeous city lord's castle and stood in front of a wide floor-to-ceiling window. The sunlight shined in from the outside, making the room very bright. When he looked outside, he could only see a vast expanse of white. When he opened a door, this was a natural little garden. The grass was soft, and there were hundreds of flowers blooming. There was a small river flowing through it, but it suddenly stopped at a cliff, turning into a silver waterfall that fell thousands of feet into the sky. The sea of clouds was like waves, with islands floating on top of it. This was the peak of the mountain range. The city lord's castle Chu Tian was in the middle of the mountain range. The castle was built on the peak of the mountain, overlooking the entire mountain range and the entire Green City area. The city lord's castle was very large. The entire castle had more than 100 floors. Looking at it from below, half of the majestic mountain had been transformed into a castle. The city and nature were perfectly integrated. It was like a work of art. The holy light shined through the dense treasure aura. The entire world was covered in a strong spiritual pressure. This was truly a rare paradise. Green City's location was very good, but it was a pity there weren't many people, so it was very deserted. But this situation would not last long. As long as Miracle Commerce's headquarters moved here, Green City's influence would grow, finally becoming a city that played an important role in the forest of chaos. Chu Tian was very satisfied with the castle. He turned to his assistant and said, "All right, we can't be lazy on our first day. Immediately bring all the documents over. This city lord is going to start working." Chapter 837. After the green protectors were watered, the deadwood quickly recovered and the leaves became greener than before. This terrifying recovery speed could be seen by the naked eye, and a pool of water of life could water 500 green protectors. The problem that the gnomes couldn't solve with a large amount of energy was solved by Chu Tian with a wave of his hand. Those green leaves were filled with vitality, and there were traces of blood that were hard to see with the naked eye on the surface of each leaf. It was like a pattern or an array that made the green protector release a special aura, as if it was stronger than before. The green religion priests quickly inspected them. Forest divinity above. The vitality of these green protectors has been doubled. Each green protector's regeneration, recovery, and strength have all been greatly increased. These puppet creatures that had been contaminated by unknown curses and energy and were on the verge of death now seem to have been baptized by a special energy, allowing their quality to improve by leaps and bounds. The green protectors could only be used for 1,000 years, but the gnomes could no longer detect an upper limit to their lifespan. Unbelievable! Clark looked at Chu Tian. After the green religion priests strengthened the green protectors 100 years ago, they couldn't find a way to strengthen the green protectors anymore, but you did it with a small bottle. Can you tell me what it is? As long as we can collect this thing, Green City's strength will increase greatly. Of course I can tell you, but I'm afraid you won't be able to collect it with your abilities. Chu Tian softly said, "This is the essence blood condensed by an ancient god before it died. The blood of a god can break all curses, so it can quickly restore these life forms." The gnomes and the fox girl were shocked. What did he say? Did their ears make a mistake? Chu Tian shrugged his shoulders and explained, "The green protectors are life forms cultivated from the ancient tree of war's fragments, so they should have the attributes of an ancient divine object. Therefore, they can absorb the blood of a god very quickly, causing some changes. Not only will these green protectors become stronger in the future, they will also not be afraid of curses." Spiritual gods were legendary existences. How could Chu Tian even have this kind of thing? The most important thing was that this human had casually taken out such a precious thing to save a few normal puppet lives. This kind of action was like putting a top-grade crystal in a toilet. It was too extravagant. Dolores' eyes almost lit up. "You actually have this kind of divine object on you. This doesn't count for anything." Chu Tian waved his hand in a very relaxed manner. Actually, his heart was still aching, but he believed in the principle of not regretting things given away. Since he chose to act cool, he would act cool to the end. So he waved his hand and said, "All right, you can place the recovered green protectors near the Necromancer Temple and let them bask in the sunlight." These green protectors that had been cursed were placed in front of the Necromancer Temple. Of course, it was not as simple as basking in the sunlight. This was a powerful deterrent to the Necromancer warlocks. First, the Necromancer's curse and pollution had been purified, which would be a large shock to them. Second, these recovered green protectors were placed here to send a message to the Necromancers. That was that Green City already knew that it was them who had caused the deaths of these green protectors. Third, these green protectors were enough to crush the entire Necromancer Temple to pieces. The several dozen necromancers stationed here shouldn't even think of escaping. This was a psychological warning and deterrence to the necromancers. It was equivalent to taking a hostage, making the troops they secretly raised outside not make a move. This deterrent effect was enough to make the necromancers hesitate. Chu Tian only needed to calm the chaos as fast as possible, and the necromancers would not be able to react in time. There's still enough time. Chu Tian looked up at the cloudless sky. Let's take care of this last problem. I want to visit the Druids. Clark never thought that Chu Tian would have this kind of idea. The Druids will not give you face. They are all wild and unruly people. Ha ha ha, that's not certain. Green City's range was very large. To be precise, Green City was a mountain area. It would take half a day to travel from one side of Green City to another on a flying demon beast. Just Green City's city area was 5-6 times larger than the Southern Summer Imperial City. The Southern Summer Imperial City had 7-8 million people, but Green City only had 1 million. Moreover, Green City was a three-dimensional structure, with many living areas and castles being built on the side of the mountain or at the top of the mountain. This was completely different from a flat human city, so Green City seemed to be one with nature. If the surrounding mountain ranges were included, then Green City's size was more than 200 times that of the Southern Summer Imperial City. It was almost the size of half the Imperial region. This was only a city. Green City had a large mountain range, a wide lake, wild demon beasts, and hidden immortal herbs in a corner. In short, whether it was the diversity of life or the changes in the landscape, it was not strange at all in this special city. This was the southeast part of Green City, and the entire area was covered in a quiet and lush rainforest. There were many towering mountain peaks that were like heaven-supporting pillars surrounding the area. Each pillar was covered in green plants that were arranged in a certain pattern, just like a natural array. In the depths of the rainforest, a shrine covered in moss stood in the middle of it. This was the Temple of the Druids. The Druids were a free power in the forest, not belonging to any power. The Druids were widely spread, with elves, spirit beasts, and in some areas outside the Forest of Chaos, there were even humans who believed in the Druids. Chu Tian brought Dolores and Clark through the rainforest to the temple. Roar! A warning roar came from the top of a tall rainforest tree. A giant wolf was standing there, staring at the intruders with its dark green eyes. This was a level 3 shadow wolf. It was said to be a terrifying killer in the forest, able to silently kill any prey. The shadow wolf did not attack and looked at them with a clear and intelligent gaze. A human voice came from the large wolf's mouth. The Druids do not welcome outsiders. If you dare take another half a step forward, don't blame the Druids for being impolite. While speaking, there were already many Druids appearing all around. These Druids had turned into wild beasts. There were giant apes, giant bears, and earth dragons, all of which were very strong demon beasts. The most important thing was that these were not just wild beasts, they were wild beasts filled with intelligence. Their intelligence and the Druids' abilities made them stronger than normal wild demon beasts. Perhaps with just a single order, the Druid would tear the intruder to shreds in an instant. Dolores and Clark were on guard, as the killing intent coming from their surroundings was real. The Druids were a wild and unruly group. They respected nature and doing as they pleased, so they would do whatever they wanted. Therefore, it was hard for Green City's rules to restrict them. Even if they recognized acting City Lord Clark, the Druids would not show mercy. This group of Druids was very strong. Although the Druids were very loose and closed off in terms of battle strength, they were even above the shamans and necromancers. Chu Tian calmly said, "I'm here to see Prophet Yoda." The Umbra demon wolf suddenly jumped up, and its body released light in the air as it strangely turned into a human. When it landed on the ground, it had turned into a fierce wolf man. It roared at Chu Tian with a cold, killing intent that made people's hairs stand on end. Dolores and Clark both revealed looks of vigilance. Chu Tian faced the wolfman druid with a mouth full of fangs, but he still acted as if nothing had happened. This was because he was clear that the people in the Divine Nature Temple would not know of Chu Tian's arrival. As expected, a low and deep voice came from inside. It's rare for an esteemed guest to visit the Druid Temple. Invite them in. Chu Tian did not even look at the aggressive wolfman druid beside him as he swaggered into the Divine Nature Temple. Clark and Dolores hesitated for a few seconds before following behind Chu Tian. Hundreds of high-level druids in all directions turned back into their human forms. They all had murderous looks on their faces and were very unfriendly. How could these damned fellows dare to disturb the prophet? The Druid religion pursued nature and simplicity. Therefore, inside the Druid temple, there were almost no decorations. It was like a primitive and ancient house. There was only a huge statue of a goddess high up in the sky. It was the Druids' goddess of nature. Her huge wings were spread out to protect a throne in front of her, and on this simple throne sat a strange person. Chu Tian had never seen this race before. He was only a meter tall and had the green skin of a goblin. He also had the long ears of an elf, and his body was full of wrinkles like a gnome. He looked like a mixture of the three races. He wore a simple robe and sat cross-legged with a long staff on his lap. His entire body was enveloped in a layer of mysterious aura. This was the legendary Druid Master Yoda. Dolores had never seen him before and had only heard of his name in rumors. Yoda was a prophet of the Forest of Chaos Druid religion. A Druid with the title of prophet was equivalent to a bishop in a church, which was higher than a high priest. No one in Green City had seen Yoda fight, but it was said that before he moved to Green City, Yoda had turned into a dragon and fought with an ancient beast. What kind of terrifying creature was a dragon? If this rumor was true, then even the high priests of Green City added together would not be a match for Yoda. The most powerful part was not this. It was said that the Druid prophets were different from normal people and had the ability to communicate with the spiritual gods to predict the future. If a large matter happened in the forest, as long as the prophet wanted to know, there was nothing that could be hidden from the prophet's eyes and ears. This was also the reason why Clark was very afraid of the Druid religion. The Druids were relatively low-key, but the threat they posed to the Green religion and Green City was not below the shaman sorcerers and necromancers. Not to mention that they were a group of unruly fellows, so anyone with this kind of influence in their territory would not be safe. Prophet Yoda would not easily meet people. Clark had only met Yoda twice in 30 years. This was also why Clark tried to stop Chu Tian when he learned that he wanted to visit the Druids. This was because it was completely useless. If he disturbed these sensitive Druids, it would attract unnecessary trouble. Who would have thought that Yoda would directly accept Chu Tian's request? This was another unexpected matter. Prophet Yoda opened his eyes. His head was very small, but his eyes were very large, just like a young animal. However, it was different from the innocent eyes of a small animal. Yoda's eyes were clear and sharp, as if he could see through everything. I'm called Chu Tian. I've admired the Druid religion for a long time. Being fortunate enough to meet the legendary Druid prophet, it really isn't easy. Chu Tian did not avoid Yoda's sharp eyes at all. But since it's such a coincidence, how about Master Yoda read my fortune? Impudent. With such disrespectful words, all of the surrounding Druids were instantly enraged. The prophet had a very high position in the Druid religion, and every Druid grew up under the teachings of the prophet. This weak little human dared to be this rude to Master Yoda. This was simply looking down on the Druid religion. This was absolutely unforgivable. Clark and Dolores' expressions changed. Chapter 838. In the City Lord's office, Chu Tian was sitting on a white jade throne inlaid with gems, holding a cup of tea that his assistant had just brewed. The water was good. It was the spring of life from the Green Religion Temple. The tea was also good. It was the Elven race's green tea. His life was very comfortable. In front of Chu Tian was a person-tall mirror. The image went from blurry to clear, finally forming the image of a girl. Although she wasn't tall, she was slender and elegant. Her skin was as white as snow, and her figure was exquisite. She was big when she should be, thin when she should be, long when she should be, and round when she should be. She was filled with the vitality of youth. In short, she couldn't find any flaws. She took a closer look. This allowed Chu Tian to observe her cheeks up close. They were as smooth as porcelain. Her large eyes were as clear as crystal. Her nose was exquisite and straight. Her peachy lips were red, and her black hair draped over her shoulders. She looked obedient and beautiful. Chu Tian proudly shook his robe. How about it? I didn't lie to you. Why aren't you greeting Sir City Lord yet? Wah. Meng Yingying's eyes lit up, and her mouth spat out a series of questions. Is this your office? It looks so luxurious. What's outside the window? Is it a garden? Why does it look like it's in the clouds? Did you really become the city lord? How did you do it this fast? Wouldn't you know if you came over to take a look? Chu Tian waved his hand like this small matter wasn't worth mentioning to him. This Oldman small town situation. Elder sister has already unified the surrounding locals and is now planning to build a commercial and industrial city. The initial plan is to hold 2 million people. This way, Miracle Commerce will have large amounts of manpower to use. The new crystal oil mine has been successfully mined, and the scale is much larger than imagined, so we can start researching the new generation of source energy weapons. Vivian has developed the fourth space warehouse, and the flower fairies have created a stable spiritual space. Our cultivation bases have increased by a large amount, and also, not bad. No one is slacking off. Since everything is developing smoothly, then come over as soon as possible. I'm lacking people by my side and need the help of you and the young miss. All right. Meng Yingying revealed a look of joy. She had already wanted to go over. Yingying, are you communicating with Chu Tian? How come I can hear his voice? At this time, a very attractive female voice came from the side, and a tall beauty with a very hot figure appeared in the mirror. Who else could it be if it wasn't the young miss? Chu Tian immediately called out to the young miss. When Meng Qingwu saw Chu Tian sit on the city lord's throne, of course she was very shocked. She never thought that Chu Tian would progress this fast. Chu Tian did not have anything to hide from the young miss, so he told her the current situation and what had happened. Like this, your position is not stable. We need a large amount of funds to develop Green City. It's a good thing that Miracle Commerce's income has been increasing over the past few months, and we already have quite a bit of funds in reserve. Meng Qingwu said without hesitation, if we don't count the value of other resources, Miracle Commerce has a total of 25,000 source stones. Now that the company's business is very large, we need to keep 5,000 low-grade source stones to use. The other 20,000 will be stored in the company's space warehouse. If you need money, you can use it at any time. I will quickly sell the resources and exchange them for more source stones for development. Miracle Commerce already had this much money. This number far surpassed Chu Tian's expectations. This was just the pure source stone reserves. If Miracle Commerce's stored resources were exchanged for source stones, it would be at least a single digit. Chu Tian was filled with confidence after understanding this. With the young miss as his wife, Chu Tian did not have any worries at all. There were clear footsteps coming from the hall. It was Dolores coming back. All right, let's not talk today. This city lord is going to start working hard. Chu Tian said this to the young miss and Yingying before closing the communication channel. He looked up. Pum. All kinds of scrolls, accounts, and notes were piled up in front of him like a small mountain. There were several hundred of them, and this completely stunned Chu Tian. What kind of mess was this? My dear Sir City Lord, what are you stunned for? The beautiful City Lord Assistant Dolores revealed a mischievous smile. This is only a small part. The 3 rooms next door are all filled with information the City Lord needs to see. Is there a mistake? How could there be this much? Think about it. The tax bills of the various places, the merchant registration information, the city's personnel, the development of the city, the surrounding forest dynamics, the forest powers, the foreign relations, the research, the people's livelihood, the city's construction draft, the water project, the farming, the public security. All of this information is here. Do you think the city lord gives orders? All right. Let's wait for the young miss to see this. Chu Tian wiped his sweat. He never thought that being the city lord would be this troublesome. It was like a bucket of cold water was poured over him. What I need to know now. How could there be a city lord like this? Dolores secretly criticized him, but she still replied, Green City situation is not optimistic. The gnomes are already in a very high deficit. I've just looked at the most recent year's expenditure, and it has reached 165% of the income. The gnomes are already on the verge of bankruptcy, and their tax revenue has not even reached 50% in the past 10 years. The trend of decline is very serious. Do you know what this means? What does this mean? The Eternal Forest and Green City have an agreement. After the gnomes give the city to the Eternal Forest, the gnomes' wealth and resources will belong to the gnomes, and the Eternal Forest will continue to support the gnomes' expenditure. In other words, from a moment you become the city lord, you will automatically take over the gnomes' losses and debts. With the current income gap, you'll need to pay around 26,500 low-grade source stones every month. The Fox clan was very sensitive to money. This point was fully reflected in Dolores. She had clearly understood the financial situation in this short period of time. Pooh! Chu Tian almost spat out the tea in his mouth onto her. You have to pay several tens of thousands of source stones every month. This kind of leaking pot, how could the Eternal Forest accept it? You're joking. That depends on whose hands it is in. Although the elves are not rich, they can still bear this bit of loss. Moreover, if Green City has a strong elven power, its popularity will quickly recover and the losses will turn into profits. There is no need to do anything at all. So for the elves, this is a profitable business. Dolores said this and then looked at Chu Tian. As for it being in your hands, don't blame me for attacking you. Once you announce the matter of you becoming the city lord, half of the Green City caravans will run away and the other half will already be on their way. This month's tax revenue will be greatly reduced and the financial revenue will be paralyzed. I think you should just pray for your own good fortune, making up for the several tens of thousands of source stones every month. This was not a small number to anyone, right? Chu Tian's miracle commerce indeed had money, but it had only been established for a short period of time, so it couldn't compare to the large forest clans. Now that he had to take over this plate, he really couldn't bear it. Where are all these source stones being spent on? Can it be reduced a bit? Dolores quickly looked over the financial details. These are mainly spent on buying materials, using Green City's military defenses, using the farms, and the gnomes' welfare. These are around half of it. Then what about the other half? Of course, it's research and development. Dolores rolled her eyes. It's not like you don't know that the gnomes have the strongest thirst for knowledge and exploration. The gnomes' research level is one of the highest in the Forest of Chaos, so the materials and resources needed for research and experiments are a large number. If Chu Tian took over Green City, of course, there were ways to greatly reduce the consumption of ordinary resources and materials, as well as the military budget. However, these were ultimately only a small part, and the proportion was less than a quarter. The main expenditure was the gnomes' welfare and the gnomes' research. This was the basic condition for the gnomes to join the Eternal Forest. The Elven King had also promised to protect them. Since he was appointed as the permanent city lord of Green City, Chu Tian and Miracle Commerce naturally had the responsibility. Chu Tian never would have thought that after becoming the acting city lord with great difficulty, he wouldn't get any benefits at all. Instead, he would have to support several 100,000 gnomes. This large pressure was enough to give him a headache. Clark is trying to make me back off, but these gnomes are looking down on me too much. Chu Tian thought about it and said, "Go and issue my first order. When this city lord is in office, the entire city will be exempt from all transaction taxes and business taxes." You're crazy. Dolores' eyes popped out. This is no different from cutting off an arm. The financial deficit is already serious enough. Do you think the hole isn't big enough? It's like you just said. Half of the merchants are preparing to run, and the other half are already on their way. What use is there in me stubbornly holding on to these taxes? Keep them here first, and there will be ways to make money from them in the future. As for the financial hole, reduce it as much as possible, and I'll make up for the rest. Chu Tian said with a face filled with disdain. Isn't it just 10,000 source stones? It's not like I can't afford it. Dolores knew that Chu Tian's background was not simple, but seeing Chu Tian's heroic spirit, not even placing a large sum in his eyes, she couldn't help looking at Chu Tian a bit higher. All right, it's fine as long as you feel there's no problem. Chu Tian did not care about the commotion he caused in Green City or the Forest of Chaos. He issued his first order like this. I'm very interested in the gnomes' research lab. Come, let's go take a look. Chu Tian's second matter was to understand the gnome situation. After all, the gnomes were rare, high-level intellectuals in the forest, which was very compatible with miracle commerce. Green City had been built for an entire 500 years. The gnomes' research lab had been built for an entire 500 years. This was not something the southern summer country could compare to. Chu Tian wanted to personally see what was different about it. Chapter 839. Yoda's clear and sharp eyes were as calm as a water mirror. There was not the slightest ripple or undercurrent. He gently waved his hand, and the surrounding druids all quieted down. Although there were some dissatisfied growls coming from their mouths, no one dared to make a move. Young human, I can feel that you are different from the others. Prophet Yoda gently and calmly said, Druid prophets can indeed feel a trace of fate, but unfortunately, this ability is limited. The stronger the fate, the more complex it is, and the more difficult it is to sort out. I may be able to see the life of a reptile, but I can't see the life of a dragon. As for you, Yoda's large eyes flashed with a trace of confusion. Forgive me for speaking bluntly. Although you are standing in front of me, I can't feel your fate. It's as if you don't belong to this time and space. This feeling is something I have never experienced before. The legends were true. Did druid prophets really have this kind of magical ability? Chu Tian had read in ancient books that there were some ancient prophets in this world. They had innate talents and could see things that people couldn't see. Chu Tian was just testing it out, but Yoda's words made him feel very shocked. Could it be that this fellow could really see something? Fate is a river, and we are all a speck of dust in it. Wherever we come from and where we go, it is all arranged by fate. We follow the current and cannot resist it. When Yoda said this, he suddenly revealed an interested expression. There's a fish that has jumped into this river. Not only is it trying to change its direction, wherever it goes, all the dust will deviate from its original path. I can feel that the fate of everyone that interacts with you has changed. Yoda's eyes fell onto Dolores and Clark before revealing an emotional expression. Green City's situation is already unpredictable. All the lines are in chaos. This was certain. If Chu Tian did not appear, the young Miss, Ying, Nangong, and everyone else would have followed their original path. Chu Tian's appearance had changed history, so Yoda's words were correct. Chu Tian was a bit surprised. There was really someone in this world that could see through fate. This Yoda's words made Chu Tian think of the ancient gods sealed in the Central State Trial Tower. They had also described fate as a river, and the stronger a life was, the more they could control their direction and position. But no matter how strong a person was, they could not change the direction of the river of fate. Clark and Dolores were secretly shocked. This druid prophet was even more profound than they imagined. The most important thing was that this prophet's evaluation of Chu Tian was very profound. Even if it was a giant dragon in front of him, even if Yoda could not accurately calculate its fate, he could still feel how strong it was against fate. He had no ability to see through Chu Tian at all. The fates of all living beings in this world were actually interconnected threads. When an unpredictable power was involved, it would cause these threads to become chaotic, and even the druid prophet would temporarily lose his ability to predict. This young human was truly different. Perhaps this was the reason why Prophet Yoda wanted to see him. Chu Tian gave a sigh. Since I can't calculate it, then I won't. Actually, knowing my own fate is quite boring. Shouldn't there be a few surprises in life? Prophet Yoda smiled. Mister is very open-minded. Since you've come to the Druid Temple, what advice do you have for the Druids? I don't dare give advice. Chu Tian did not keep him in suspense, and directly threw out the chip he had already thought of. I've heard that before Prophet Yoda brought the Druids to Green City, they had fought with a terrifying ancient fierce beast. Prophet Yoda's injuries have not healed yet. Yoda did not reply. But this was indeed the case. The Druids did not come here with a special purpose. It was just the gnomes' prejudice against the Druids. Yoda's strength at his peak could be considered a first-class expert in the Forest of Chaos. But after the battle with the fierce beast, his strength had fallen quite a bit. Of course, even if he wasn't as strong as before, Prophet Yoda was still comparable to the high priests of the large sections. Chu Tian did not keep him in suspense. I am the new city lord of Green City, and I admire the druid culture. I can think of a way to cure the prophet's injuries, but I hope the druids can ally with Green City. The expressions of the other druids fell. He could cure the prophet's injuries? If it was like this, then this was a large matter. Prophet Yoda did not lose his composure at all. Even his eyes did not change. It was like this had nothing to do with him. Each druid is free. I have no right to make decisions for the druids. Chu Tian knit his brows. Why did this fellow not know what was good for him? Chu Tian could only lower his request. I can give the prophet an effective cure, but I don't want the druids to be involved in the battle between Green City and the shamans. Yoda calmly said, the druids love peace and will never be involved in a fight. As long as other people don't look at us with hostility, we won't look at others with hostility. All right, then it's a deal. Chu Tian was in a hurry and did not want to bargain with this prophet. As long as he promised not to be involved in this conflict, everything else was fine. Chu Tian was more assured with the druids. The people of this sect were very simple, believing in the god of nature and the god of druids. The druids did not have any lies and would not participate in a fight for power. Chu Tian coming to the druid temple to visit the prophet was just insurance. Since the prophet had personally promised something, Chu Tian believed the druids could do it. When Chu Tian left with the gnomes and fox girls, Yoda closed his large bright eyes. His brows wrinkled even deeper as he fell into silence. The druids looked at each other in blank dismay. They all knew that when the prophet did this, he must be thinking about something. Suddenly, Prophet Yoda suddenly raised his hand, and his source spirit was released. Yoda's source spirit was very strange. It was actually a turtle shell. It was the kind of turtle shell used for sacrifices and divination. The druids all knelt down on one knee seeing this. They all understood that the prophet was going to make a prophecy again. The surrounding druid altars poured some kind of energy into the turtle shell, and words began to appear on the surface of the turtle shell. This was the druid prophet's prophecy. Only, before the words appeared, the entire turtle shell began to crack, and the cracks quickly covered the entire shell. With a thunderous sound, the entire turtle shell suddenly shattered into pieces. Pooh! Yoda spat out a mouthful of blood. Ah, Sir Prophet! The druids quickly went up to support him, but Yoda waved his hand. He looked very weak, but there was no danger to his life. It really wasn't good. As long as he was beside this human, any divination or deduction abilities would lose their effect. He already had no way of predicting anything in Green City. All the threads here were tangled together and constantly changing, causing the other threads outside to change as well. Only when they were far enough away would they be able to regain this ability. Yoda revealed a strange and complex expression. Was there really a person in this world that could disturb fate? Chu Tian had used less than 2 days, and everything had been arranged. Now, he just had to wait for the shaman army and the local army to make their move. Around the 3rd day, the local army reached around 230,000 people, and they were all male elites from large tribes. This was already an army that could threaten the gnomes. The locals did not have any patience, and now they did not want to wait any longer. Kill, kill, kill. Over 200,000 people gathered in the forest, covering an area of over 10 miles. They were filled with wild, killing intent and roars, just like a landslide, causing the birds and beasts in the forest to scatter. Several large tribe chiefs took the lead and decided to lead their subordinates into Green City to plunder. Several shaman sorcerers in the army gave these people various kinds of witchcraft. For example, the berserk technique, the bloodthirsty technique, and etc. When these local warriors were buffed by the witchcraft of the shaman priests, their battle strength naturally increased. Everything was prepared. Green City is in front of us. Let us charge in and overthrow those weak gnomes. The local army could not wait any longer. Like a tide, they began to move towards Green City. Green City's passages were filled with barriers and green protectors, But the shaman religion had already promised that as long as the local army attacked, the shaman sorcerers would close the defenses from the inside. Several 100,000 locals would be able to charge into Green City. The gnomes' battle strength was not that strong, so these several 100,000 would be able to push them back. Not to mention that there was another group of shaman followers attacking at the same time, so there was hope of destroying Green City. Just when a dozen tribal chiefs led a tide of clansmen into the canyon, they suddenly found that all the barriers in the canyon had been opened, layer by layer, like a huge barrier. The two cliffs were filled with half-elf archers and half-elf priests. What's going on? Didn't the shamans say that they could close the gnomes' defenses? Although they were very dissatisfied with the current situation, they had already charged in. Even if Green City's defenses were not closed, they could only brace themselves and continue fighting. Who would have thought that when the locals were circulating their spirit energy to fight? Something that no one would have thought would happen. When the locals' spirit energy began to circulate, it was like their bodies were burning. All the spirit energy went wild in their meridians, and they could not control it at all. What is going on? Damn, I've been poisoned. Everyone has been poisoned. What is going on here? The natives were shocked to find that almost all of the main force had been poisoned. Before they could react, the Minotaur chief Arnold suddenly let out a roar as his giant axe chopped down on a shaman priest. With a voila sound, the shaman priest was like a broken porcelain vase, instantly exploding into pieces of flesh and blood that filled the sky. Chapter 840. The First Order was announced. Green City was filled with another stir. This method of cutting off most of the basic income, this was a hard-to-understand matter in any city. Not to mention that Green City was already in a bad situation, and now they were cutting off the income from the merchants. How would the city survive? Clark quickly came to find Chu Tian to ask. Chu Tian did not explain his actions. Rather, he arrogantly said, "You have to look further. Green City's population is already small enough. What can this bit of tax be used for? It would be better to make the city the first tax-free city in the Forest of Chaos and raise its popularity first. You can be assured that the gnomes' welfare and regular expenses, even if I have to pay out of my own pocket, I won't give you a single source stone." This person had a lot of money and was rich and overbearing. This made the gnomes feel confused. Could it be that this human had another power behind him? Otherwise, how could his expression not change in the face of such a large financial hole? Even if they could fill this large hole, this power was not simple. But seeing Chu Tian's solemn promise, although the gnomes were filled with doubt, they couldn't do anything to him. Clark came at the right time. Chu Tian said to him, "I'm prepared to visit the gnome research base and the construction of the city. I wonder if this is convenient. These cannot be shown to outsiders." However, Chu Tian was now the acting city lord. If the acting city lord couldn't even understand the city's situation, how could he manage the city? Clark discussed with the gnome elders for a few minutes. "Of course, there's no problem. Please come with us." The gnome research base had always been a secret and was also one of the most mysterious places in this area. Being able to stay by Chu Tian's side this time was also an opportunity for her to broaden her horizons. The gnomes introduced as they walked. The gnome research base was established at the same time as Green City and has a very long history. It is also the most complete research base in the forest. The Green Religion Temple next to the mountain was the entrance to the gnome research base. After walking through a path to the mountain, there were 4 elevators in front of them. Chu Tian and Dolores stood in the elevators, and the elevators immediately began to descend. There were transparent crystal stone windows all around them, and when they sat in the elevators, they could clearly feel that they were moving through different layers of rock. Very, very deep. After descending 400-500 meters, finally a giant underground world appeared in front of them. Dolores felt her masseter muscles go out of control as her chin fell down and her eyes popped out. She found it hard to believe that under Green City, there was actually such a large underground cave. This was simply unimaginable. The gnomes explained, "The Forest of Chaos geological structure is very special. Our ancestors studied the geology of the forest, and were surprised to find that there were many underground caves under the forest of chaos. There were some deep underground worlds with large amounts of demons, dark elves, and other dark creatures living there. There were also some places that were so deep that they couldn't be seen and could contain ancient Great Era secrets. There wouldn't be demons under Green City, right? It's not that there isn't a possibility, but we haven't found one yet. The elevator was about to reach its destination. When Chu Tian looked down from above, he could see gnome warehouses next to each other. On the straight tracks, there were actually trains parked there. Each train had a streamlined front, and there were several to 30 rectangular containers in the center. It was an underground train station. In front of them, there was a large number of palaces that appeared in front of them. The size of the underground palace could hold several 100,000 people. The entire underground palace was made of metal, and it was filled with a modern style. There were many metal pipes here. The large ones were several meters thick and needed several people to wrap their arms around them. The small ones were only a few centimeters thick and weren't much thicker than a finger. It was very complicated and very dense. The entire research base was connected by these large and small pipes. There was more than one underground palace like this. Looking from afar, there were several underground palaces flickering with lights in the distance. Between these underground palaces was a bottomless, dark abyss. The underground palaces were like lighthouses in the dark world. They were all connected to each other by floating railway tunnels or cable cars. Although the underground world was deep, it was not as dark or as silent as one would imagine. Other than the lighthouses and the underground palaces, the walls in all directions were covered in glowing crystals and all kinds of strange glowing plants. Dolores even saw a glowing mushroom. Its cap was at least 30 meters in diameter, and it was like a huge light bulb that illuminated a large area around it. Gurgling water flowed out of the cracks in the rocks, turning into a clear waterfall that fell into a bottomless abyss. There were some strange lizards and bats that were currently moving around on the walls. In this space that never saw the light of day, there was actually a strange ecosystem that made people sigh with admiration at the wonders of the Creator. This underground space is unfathomably deep, and we still haven't found out how deep it is. However, the underground world is very rich in resources, and the deeper one goes, the richer the resources are. Of course, the deeper one goes, the higher the chance of being attacked by dangerous creatures. Chu Tian looked into the bottomless abyss and fell into deep thought. Regarding the underground world of the Forest of Chaos, of course he had some understanding. This was a very complex place, especially in this era. It was unknown how many dangers were hidden here and how many treasures were hidden here. If he had a chance in the future, he would have to properly explore it. Of course, it was not the right time yet, and he did not have the strength to do so. Clark said in a proud voice, "The gnomes use an entire 200 years to create a complete transportation network." The gnomes' transportation system was made up of trains and cable cars. When they came out of the elevator, a station appeared in front of them. The train was made up of several carriages, and the structure was tight and stable. This was the gnomes' underground train. The gnomes have 7 underground research bases and have found over 100 precious resources. Clark said in a proud voice, "These underground railways are like blood vessels, connecting the gnomes' research bases, mines, farms, and production areas, forming an efficient production network. This is truly a complex and difficult project. Normal people might not be able to complete it." Dolores said to Clark, "What do these trains move? Come with me to the power room and you'll understand." Clark opened the power room of a train, and there was a honeycomb-shaped power room inside. Each power room was filled with red powder, and there was a source energy array carved on the surface of the power room. There were also large amounts of source stones embedded to activate the source energy array. The power source of the train is a stable fire-attributed crystal powder. This powder can release a strong flame and energy, which is finally absorbed by the source energy array, forming a complete power system that can easily push a several hundred-ton train forward. It can reach a maximum speed of 300 kilometers per hour. This made Chu Tian a bit shocked. Although the gnome's technology did not enter his eyes, At the very least, it was considered quite advanced in this era. The cost of the flame crystal stones was not high. Using the energy of the crystal stones to move the train forward, it would greatly reduce the cost of running the train, but the source energy array would consume spirit energy. This source stone consumption would not be a small number. Clark explained, to maintain the basic operation of the transport network, it will consume at least 1,000 low-grade source stones every month. This was too damn wasteful. This was a completely unnecessary consumption. Miracle Commerce's source energy battery cost was low, and it could maintain the consumption of industrial source energy. Chu Tian only needed to make some simple modifications, and he could easily save a large amount of source stones. Now we invite Sir Acting City Lord to visit the gnome's research base. The gnome train rumbled as it slowly moved forward. The first place it went to was the underground palace in front of them. The entire underground palace was covered in train tracks, and they could clearly see the entire underground palace as they passed through the countless buildings. This is the fire energy research room. This is the water energy research room. This is the water of life synthesis room. This is... Chu Tian rode the gnome train through the gnome research base. He could be considered to have experienced just how grand the gnome's research base was. The gnomes loved to explore in nature. It was no wonder they could give away Green City so easily. This was because for the gnomes, as long as they had this underground research base and the corresponding funds, it would be enough. Why is this place this big? Dolores looked at the large round space in front of her and asked, "What's inside?" "This is the Underground Creature Research Lab." Underground creature? Clark opened the door to the research lab. Huge prison cells lined up in front of him. Inside each cell was a strange-looking creature. Dolores stared at the thing in the first cell. That fellow looked a bit strange. Its body was very evil and slender, only having a few tentacles to support it. However, its head was as big as a bucket, and a large eye was condensing a dazzling light. Suddenly, with a pung sound, Dolores was shocked. A beam of light shot out from this creature's eyes. If it wasn't for the gnome prison's barrier protecting them, this beam of light that could melt steel would have been impossible for Dolores to dodge. Dolores asked, "What kind of monster is this?" "You're too ignorant." Chu Tian did not wait for the gnomes to explain before saying, "This thing is called an evil eye, a very common underground creature. Its main ability is to use its eyes to shoot beams of light." Clark and the gnomes once again revealed looks of admiration to Chu Tian. This kind of creature is rarely seen on the surface. The acting city lord is truly knowledgeable. "Che, what's wrong with this?" Chu Tian curled his lips in disdain and immediately looked at the other creatures. He couldn't help admiring the gnomes. They could actually raise this many dark creatures here. It was simply like a museum. He finally understood why the gnomes spent so much money on the research lab. The scale, equipment, and level of research were all at the top of the world. Spending several tens of thousands of low-grade source stones every month was already very frugal. Clark asked, "The gnomes do not have any hobbies other than searching for the truth. Although most of the gnomes' research cannot be turned into profit, this is the joy of the gnomes. So, if you really want to become the city lord, then this research lab. You're thinking too much. You have to understand, I'm also a scholar." Chu Tian patted the gnome's shoulder. "This research lab is the true wealth of Green City. Compared to it, those castles on the surface are not worth mentioning. Not only will I not close this research lab, I will also increase the resources, talents, and technology investment by 10 to 100 times, making this research lab even more glorious." Dolores on the side opened her mouth, but did not say anything. The gnomes led by Clark revealed looks of gratitude and admiration. Chapter 841. Arnold destroying a shaman priest was just the beginning. Or rather, it was an order that made the Minotaurs all go wild. These 3-4-meter tall monsters' eyes were red as they panted for breath. They all brandished wheel axes and giant hammers as they surrounded the other shaman priests, causing the expressions of the shaman priest to fall. "You dare attack the shaman priest?" The shaman god won't let you off. The shaman god will use the most vicious curse to make you wish you were dead. The goat tribe shaman gave a mournful roar. This kind of threat was useless against the enraged minotaurs. The shaman priests were very strong, but there were only 5 shaman priests, and there were 5,000 minotaurs. This was a battle without any suspense. The shaman priests were not strong in close combat, and with a large group of minotaurs charging at them, they didn't have any strength to resist at all. The shaman that had been threatening the minotaurs was instantly trampled into a pile of flesh and blood, no longer being able to see his original appearance. Arnold. The expressions of the other locals became very ugly. There was a tribe chief who couldn't help angrily shouting, "You shameless traitor, you actually betrayed the forest's allies. You won't have a good death. Idiot." Arnold's large face revealed a taunting expression. "You don't even know that you've been used by others. Father is saving you. It's fine if you want to die, but do you want to implicate the surrounding tribes?" The tribe chief angrily shouted, "What did you say? I have concrete information and evidence. Everything is the doing of the shamans." Arnold took out a broken banner. "This is something I found in the forest. There's a witchcraft technique on it, and the shaman sorcerers have reduced their prey. This is all a scheme." Arnold suddenly jumped onto a tall rock. "These despicable fellows want us to be cannon fodder in attacking Green City. There are many of you that have been controlled by the shaman priest's witchcraft, but you idiots don't even know it." The Minotaur's loud voice reverberated through the valley, making the locals speechless with stunned looks. At this time, the barrier was removed and a gnome army entered the valley. "This Minotaur chief is right," the Green Religion priest at the front shouted. 3 days ago, the Green City envoys were affected by the shaman religion's witchcraft. We have already investigated this. This conflict was caused by the shamans. So we have reason to believe that there are people among you that have been controlled by the shamans. Arnold directly ordered the Minotaurs to capture the large tribe chiefs and high-level leaders. "What are you doing? Release our leaders." The Green Religion priest looked at Arnold. Arnold said without any doubt, "According to my observation, it was these people." The Green Religion priests took out talismans, pasting them on the chiefs and high-level leaders as talismans. When they were activated, most of them gave pitiful cries. Some people spat out insect eggs from their stomachs, and there were several chiefs who had insect coming out of their orifices. This scene shocked everyone. "What is this?" The natives were given a fright. The shaman's witchcraft is very sinister and vicious. It can take lives at any time and can control thoughts. These chiefs have their thoughts controlled by the witchcraft, but sometimes they don't even know it. I think all of you should have woken up by now. When the witchcraft was dispelled, although they suffered heavy injuries, there was no danger to their lives. The expressions of these native leaders became more and more unsightly. When they thought about how some of the thoughts and emotions that had arisen during this period of time were indeed very strange. They did not appear on their own at all, but were forcefully stuffed into their brains by some kind of power. Then they saw these bugs that had crawled out of their bodies. So it was like this, so it was like this. No wonder they had gone crazy. No wonder they had lost their reason. No wonder the local powers could gather so quickly. Actually, a person with a bit of a calm head would not have made the decision to attack Green City. Even if the Green City gnomes were weak, they were not something these local powers could resist. This kind of battle was equivalent to sending themselves to death. Arnold loudly shouted, "This disaster is all the fault of the shamans. They did not hesitate to create a famine and chaos, causing our people to suffer heavy losses. Now they are leading us to attack Green City, using us as cannon fodder. How could there be such a thing in this world? In my opinion, blood for blood, a tooth for a tooth, will let the shamans taste the anger of the forest." The locals realized that they had been tricked, and they all angrily roared out, "Green City is willing to work with the forest tribes to fight the evil shamans." A Green Religion priest promised, "We will use the name of the forest god. As long as the brave warriors of the tribes stop their horses at the edge of the cliff and stand on Green City's side to resist the shamans, Green City will not pursue any responsibility. Then, not only will Green City not hold you responsible, they will also provide you with enough food, allowing you to pass through this dangerous period. The priests swore in the name of the spiritual god. This kind of oath was reliable, and the locals did not have any worries. What are you still hesitating for? Arnold's large nostrils let out 2 white breaths. The evil shamans have harmed many Minotaur tribesmen, so the Minotaurs will take revenge for our tribesmen. Even if they were slow, they would still understand this now. This was why the moment the crisis erupted, the shamans appeared in the various tribes. Not only did they encourage the tribes to work together, they were even willing to help the locals fight. It turned out that all of this had been arranged beforehand. These forest tribes and chiefs had been toyed with in the palm of their hands. The locals were filled with rage. The poison the locals were poisoned with was not fatal. This was just losing the ability to use spirit energy for an hour. Most of them would recover their battle strength very quickly. Kill the shamans. Kill the shamans. One by one, the enraged chiefs responded, and then it spread to all the forest natives. When the gnomes saw this, they immediately opened the barrier. The large group of locals were like a stream of water, wildly charging into Green City. High Priest Mars in the Shaman Temple felt the sky shaking shouts. The locals are killing their way in this quickly? Green City's attention has been attracted by the locals. Even if a portion of them are attracted, the shaman religion will have a chance. An army of several 100,000 plus the several dozen priests and 2,000 voodoo puppets in the temple. I don't believe we can't take down a trivial Green City. But at this time, a large wave of flame arrows fell onto the shaman temple, piercing into the walls, tables, and even statues. The flames immediately ignited the surrounding objects. High Priest Mars' face sunk. The gnomes dare make a move before us? Go! Release the voodoo puppets and let them see the might of the shaman religion. The voodoo puppets charged out of the shaman temple like meteors. At this time, there were several thousand gnome archers and soldiers with 10 green protectors surrounding this place, wildly attacking the shaman temple. They suddenly saw a large group of sharp shadows charge out, and each one was covered in curse and witchcraft energy. The expressions of the green religion priests changed when they saw this. Be careful. These are the shaman religion's voodoo puppets. The gnome archers' archery skills were not inferior to the elves. After spirit energy was poured into the arrows, each arrow could only be seen as a flash of light. They were strangely fast and incomparably sharp. The voodoo puppets charging at the front were instantly cut apart by the light. The voodoo puppets are only SOSO. When the gnomes were a bit careless, the voodoo puppets that were cut apart suddenly turned into poisonous insects that covered the sky. It was like a small dark cloud that instantly reformed in the middle of the gnome archers, turning back into the voodoo puppets and looking like they weren't injured at all. The voodoo puppets were puppets that the shaman priests had spent a large amount of resources to refine. Their bodies were filled with curse and witchcraft energy, and before their energy was used up, they were almost immortal. Ah! A gnome gave a pitiful cry. The voodoo puppet raised it into the air with a single hand, and its body began to wither at a speed visible to the naked eye. Then it inflated like a balloon, and with an explosive sound, countless poisonous insects and poison shot out from its body. The surrounding gnomes were not spared. Too terrifying. The witchcraft and curses on these monsters were too strong. Marzu walked out of the temple with a group of shaman priests. His white hair fluttered in the wind, and his skinny face looked like a gloomy skeleton. Green religion idiots, if you want to attack the shaman temple, you won't be able to do it with just these few people. The shaman priests controlled the voodoo puppets. The battle strength of 2,000 voodoo puppets was enough to destroy an army. These gnomes were the elites of the tribe, but it was impossible for them to block the shaman's attack. Since they've delivered themselves to my door, this old man won't be polite. Marza decided to first destroy the elites in front of him and then bring the voodoo puppets to destroy the gnome castle. Kill. Kill them all. Quickly retreat. Quickly retreat. The gnomes were forced to retreat again and again. The green protectors created a defensive barrier to cover their retreat. These few green protectors were of no use, so the shaman priests controlled the voodoo puppets to attack. Not long later, they broke through the big sister green protector's barrier and quickly chased after the gnomes. Marzu's face was filled with ridicule and ridicule, but this expression did not last long. Because the gnomes had retreated into the middle of the large group of green religion priests, Marzu's face twitched a few times. He suddenly remembered that in the battle just now, the gnomes did not use the power of the green religion priests. There was only one possibility. They were pretending to be defeated to lure the enemy in. Come back. As soon as Marzu gave the order, the green religion priests made a move before the shaman priests. There were no vines flying in the sky or summoned tree demons. There was only an incomparably large source energy array activated by the green religion priests. This source energy array was something the shaman priest had never seen before, but what made the shaman priests incomparably shocked was that the witch puppet lost its balance as soon as it entered the source energy array, not even being able to stand properly. Following that, its skin and bones fell like mud, and those insects came out of its body with a sharp cry, as if they wanted to escape. However, when they fell to the ground, they did not even have time to struggle before they died, almost in an instant. Chapter 842. How could Chu Tian not be happy? The gnomes had spent several hundred years to build such a solid foundation. How much effort did this save Chu Tian? This was like a person who wanted to buy a house, but in the end, a luxurious beast carriage, a guard, and even a beautiful maid to warm the bed were all given to him. This was truly too beneficial. The gnome research base was the standard of this era. Even the strong empires of the continent were like this. With this kind of good foundation and the technology and team Chu Tian brought, it would create unimaginable value in the future. Chu Tian was very much looking forward to using this research base. The gnomes' thoughts were not as complicated as humans, but the gnomes could feel that Chu Tian's words were not just for show. This human seemed like he placed a lot of importance on research, and this kind of person becoming the city lord was very beneficial to the gnomes. The elves were strong, but they were not interested in this. So, if Chu Tian fully supported the operation of the research base, he would gain the recognition of the gnomes. The Dark Creature Research Base had several dozen low-level dark creatures like evil eyes and cave spiders. There were several hundred of them, and the cost of raising them each day was not a small number. Chu Tian was very puzzled. Why did the gnomes capture these creatures? Could it be they wanted to refine a synthetic life form? This kind of synthetic life form refining was a very high-level technology, and the gnomes could not do it. Clark explained, "There are countless of these creatures in the underground world, and they often harass us. The goal of our research is to find the weakness of these creatures and find a better way to deal with them." Chu Tian stared at a large cave spider and pondered for a few seconds. "You're saying that there are many of these creatures here? The underground creatures are not the same as those on the surface. They are more tenacious, and they mostly eat the underground dark plants or eat crystal stones to survive. For example, the evil eyes and eye demons live in the crystal mines and eat the crystal stones to obtain energy. They grow very quickly, and they are like cockroaches and mice that can't be killed. I suspect that in the area we've explored, there are at least several tens of thousands of them, giving us a headache." "That many?" Chu Tian's eyes lit up. "Good. Very good." The gnomes looked at each other in blank dismay. What did the acting city lord's praise mean? Was it a good thing that there were so many monsters underground? Is there a map? Map? Oh, there is. This was a map of the underground research base. It clearly marked the location of the underground palace and the railway, as well as the mines and caves that had already been explored. As for the areas where the dark creatures often appeared, there were gnomes guarding them. This was to prevent strange creatures from destroying the research base, and also to prevent them from threatening Green City. The underground world was too complicated. It was like a giant maze. According to Chu Tian's understanding of the world, the light and positive energy was distributed in the sky, and the dark and turbid energy was buried underground. The deeper one went underground, the stronger the negative energy. It was unknown how far the forest of chaos underground world extended, but what was certain was that there were evil dark creatures living deep underground. The gnomes did not dare explore too deep and did not dare explore too far because they were afraid of meeting terrifying monsters. But even at this level, there were still many monsters living there. Come, let's take a look at this area. The place Chu Tian was talking about was a cave. Because the cave looked like the gaping mouth of a demon. Even the rocks inside were a frightening dark red, so the low cry was called the demon's mouth. It said that most of the underground monsters the gnomes met came out of the demon's mouth. Therefore, the gnomes thought the demon's mouth was an even deeper and more terrifying underground space. In order to not disturb existences that shouldn't be disturbed, the demon's mouth was not allowed to be explored. Elder, several gnome troops stationed here saw the train stop at the Demon's Mouth station, and they immediately ran over to ask out of curiosity. Sir Acting City Lord. Clark looked at Chu Tian and asked, "Are you sure you want to go in? Even the gnomes don't dare explore this place, and even we don't dare go too deep. If you take the risk on a whim, I'm afraid." "It's fine. I'm not a fool. If something is wrong, I'll come back." "All right then." Chu Tian pulled out his sword and left. Dolores followed without any hesitation. Clark saw that he couldn't persuade Chu Tian, so he had the gnome troops prepare themselves. He then led the old priest to chase after him. At this time, Chu Tian had already walked a certain distance. Dolores observed the surrounding walls and said while walking, "The dark aura here is very thick, making people feel very uncomfortable. The devil's mouse fungus and vines were mostly a strange purple or blue color, and the rocks were a dark red color, making it seem rather dark. The cave was open in all directions. Sometimes it was wide, sometimes it was narrow, sometimes it was steep like a mountain, and sometimes it was deep like a ravine. There were always strange fluctuations and sounds coming from the surroundings, making this place feel an ominous aura. Chu Tian felt the fluctuations in the air. What kind of monster is coming? Before his voice even fell, there were sharp sounds coming from all directions as giant figures charged out one after another. They were very fast, and even in this complicated terrain, they could still move at high speeds. Other than Chu Tian, they were all in the true spirit realm. Dolores was prepared to make a move, but she didn't even have time to use the demonic god priest summoning technique. She suddenly felt like she had been hit by a stick and instantly felt dizzy. She couldn't even stand straight and fell onto Chu Tian's body. Chu Tian quickly supported Dolores. A ferocious figure charged over and several sharp claws swept out like lightning, attempting to tear Chu Tian and Dolores to pieces. Fuck, seeking death. Chu Tian's blade was covered in blue flames, and a beautiful sword chi slashed out. The monster gave a pitiful cry and flapped its wings to fly away. However, although it wasn't cut in half by the sword chi, it was covered in the terrifying netherworld flame. It didn't have time to retreat before it was surrounded by blue and white flames, and it turned into ashes with a mournful cry. The gnome priests were all very shocked. Just a casual slash from Chu Tian was enough to show his strength. This was definitely not an attack an awakened soul cultivator could send out. Perhaps even a true spirit expert wouldn't be able to easily block it. This human young brat really wasn't simple. "Be careful!" Clark recovered from the dizziness and quickly shouted. "These are bat demons. They can use spiritual attacks and are very hard to deal with." Chu Tian had indeed been hit by a few weak spiritual attacks, but this spiritual attack couldn't affect him at all. When he had just exchanged blows, he had seen what the attackers looked like. It was a monster with an ape-like human body, but it had bat-like wings. Each one was very big, weighing at least 200 kilograms. Spiritual attacks could affect true spirit experts. This was truly an incredible monster. Chu Tian noticed that the bat demon's spiritual attack was a large area indiscriminate attack released by ultrasonic waves. He couldn't help thinking that if there was this kind of monster on the battlefield, it would sweep through a large area. This was not exaggerated at all. Even a true spirit expert like Dolores was hit without any preparation and instantly lost her battle strength. Wouldn't a normal, awakened soul cultivate or bleed from their 7 orifices and die? Good, very good. If they could tame this kind of monster and use it for Green City, why would Green City be afraid of invaders? Compared to the Marauders' Batmounts, the Bat Demons were not only stronger, their intelligence was not low either. They had the intelligence of a 6 or 7-year-old human child. If they could be tamed, they could understand some orders. Chu Tian came here with this goal in mind. Not to mention Chu Tian having several beast taming methods. With the little fox and the demonic god religion's priests, these headache-inducing monsters could be easily tamed. This was not trouble. This was a large amount of wealth. The green religion priests used a secret technique to resist the spiritual wave. Clark forcefully raised his staff, and a vine reached out, instantly wrapping around a fast-flying bat demon. This bat demon gave a pitiful cry as its vitality and water were sucked away, finally turning into a dried corpse that was hung above the cave. They didn't have time to kill more bat demons. The rock wall on the left suddenly shattered, and a few beams of light as thick as an arm shot through the rock wall towards them. A green religion priest quickly released a talisman to condense a shield of light. When the beams of light hit the shield of light, it shattered it to pieces, barely blocking this attack. Dolores had just recovered. What happened now? Dolores found that in all directions of the dark cave, there were many light bulbs that appeared at the same time. These lights went from weak to strong and finally became very dazzling, making it hard for people to open their eyes. Evil eyes, damn. There are so many evil eyes. The evil eyes had excellent dark vision, and their range of vision was even greater than an eagle's. Their eyes could break through illusions and camouflage, as well as release a kind of radiation. Even if there was a wall between them, they could still clearly see people. The evil eyes could not make any sounds, so they used their minds to communicate. Although their intelligence was not high, they had a tacit understanding. This many evil eyes attacking together. This power was more than enough to kill 2 true spirit experts. Clark raised a long staff in his hand high up, and a layer of emerald green light barrier came down. When the evil eyes' beams of light hit the barrier, they were all absorbed by the barrier, only creating ripples like water. Great Forest Goddess, please unleash your great power. Clark released a dazzling green light. In the next second, Clark's entire body exploded. His body disappeared and turned into a large patch of green leaves. These green leaves were like countless butterflies as they scattered in all directions. It was like a tide that could not be stopped, instantly covering one's field of vision. These leaves looked weak, but they were actually endowed with the power of divine weapons. They could easily slice through the bat demons, and those weak evil eyes couldn't even withstand a single blow. When the leaves floated past them, their bodies would immediately break into pieces. Dolores said in a shocked voice, "This Clark's strength is not weaker than the shaman's Mars." The leaves all turned back into Clark's short figure. However, there was not a single complete monster in the surroundings. They had all been cut into pieces or even turned into mincemeat. Chu Tian wanted to say a few words of praise, but he felt a strange energy fluctuation. There was an evil eye that had been cut in half that was slowly coming back together, finally standing up again. That large head shook left and right, as if it did not understand what had just happened. Seeing its companions wriggling all over the ground, its eyes began to release a light blue glow. Shwa! The starlight fell onto one of its dying companions, and an incredible thing happened. That evil eye that had been cut into several pieces suddenly came back together and used its tentacles to stand up. Clark knit his brows. He picked up a leaf and was about to smash the strange evil eye. Slow down. This is a bit interesting. Chu Tian stopped Clark from killing this evil. The evil eye's energy comes from its food. If an evil eye had been consuming fire attribute crystals for a few days, its attack beam would become fire attribute. If it had been consuming thunder attribute crystals recently, its attack beam would become thunder attribute. This evil eye's energy is very special. which means that the place it lives in has a special mineral deposit. We might as well let it go for now and find that place. Perhaps it will be useful to us. Chu Tian had already recognized it. The evil eye could release a beam of light similar to star energy, and the star energy had a healing ability, so it could heal its injured companions. This evil eye had most likely eaten a special, or would be very useful to Chu Tian. Chu Tian decided to try his luck, and perhaps he would have an unexpected harvest. Chapter 843. Chu Tian stood far away on the short mountain, watching everything unfold. The 20,000 gnome elites had already surrounded the shaman temple. Not even a drop of water could trickle through. The array you gave the gnomes is too strong. Dolores's eyes almost popped out of their sockets when she saw hundreds of shaman puppets being disintegrated by the array. These shamans are completely useless after meeting you. I'm really curious. It's your first time coming into contact with shamans. How can you break their witchcraft? Your culture is not a small difference from mine, so it's hard for me to explain. Just treat me as a genius who can predict the future. Ha, ha, ha. If the other side was Ying, she would have gone crazy seeing Chu Tian's arrogant appearance. Even the young miss would give him a fierce look. Good, my genius or city lord. Dolores was not angry at all. Rather, she walked over to Chu Tian and massaged his shoulders. She used a charming voice to ask, I'm really curious. Just tell me, all right? I'm begging you. The fox girl's full figure rubbed against him. Her breath smelled like orchids, and her devilish voice entered his ears. There weren't many people in this world that could endure it. How could Chu Tian not know what this fox girl was thinking? The shaman religion was a very strong religion. Not only in the savage highlands and Green City, they also had a strong influence in many areas of the Forest of Chaos. They had suppressed the demonic god religion for many years, and if she could obtain the method to deal with the shamans from Chu Tian, would she need to fear these sinister and damned sorcerers in the future? Actually, witchcraft is a variation of an ancient technique, but it is just a small trick in the end, not being able to find the essence. As long as you can find a way to counter it, any witchcraft can be destroyed. Chu Tian said halfway. As for the specific method, I can't reveal it for now. You could just work for me in the future, and you'll naturally be able to learn anything you want. How could Dolores be satisfied with this kind of perfunctory answer? When Dolores was prepared to use the Fox Clan charm technique to interrogate this fellow, there were suddenly shouts coming from a direction. Northwest direction. It should be the shaman believers attacking. However, they never thought that they would meet this kind of fierce resistance from the gnomes. This was because the locals that were used to restrain the gnomes did not have any effect, and the gnomes were focused on the shamans, so it was impossible for the shamans to attack. Arnold and the other forest locals might even use the gnomes to deal with the shaman believers after learning the truth, so it shouldn't be a problem. As for the variable, the undead temple was already under control. The druids would definitely not interfere in the situation. If these two shaman factions didn't participate, then the other churches and forest factions wouldn't have the guts to fish in troubled waters. The only variable now was the shaman temple. After all, there were over 1,000 shaman sorcerers in the shaman temple and close to 100 shaman sorcerers with the title of priest. Adding in the puppet, it was a very terrifying battle strength. If it was used at a critical moment, it could turn the situation around to a certain degree. But it was a pity. The shaman sorcerer's most advantageous battle puppets were no longer of much use. These voodoo puppets were very high-level voodoo crystals. Each puppet needed a large amount of time, resources, and energy to be refined. The voodoo puppet's battle strength was around the 8-9th awakened soul layer, but its witchcraft curses were enough to kill a true spirit cultivator. The 2,000 voodoo puppets were the accumulation of the Green Country shamans over several generations. Just like how the Green Protectors were important to the gnomes, the voodoo puppets were the foundation of shaman priests. Not to mention outsiders, even the shamans themselves did not know what fatal weakness the voodoo puppets had. Before these monsters ran out of energy, they could continuously revive. If the shaman priests fought with them, they could quickly replenish the voodoo puppet's energy. There was no high-efficiency method that could restrain these troublesome fellows. The battle strength of these 2,000 voodoo puppets was not inferior to an army of 100,000. It was because they had absolute confidence in the voodoo puppets that the shaman sorcerers did not station an army in the shaman temple. Now that they were surrounded by the gnomes, their faces turned incomparably dark, and they did not know what to do. The shaman religion's perfect voodoo puppets had been easily broken by the gnomes. This was undoubtedly a heavy blow to them. The shaman religion had no other choice. They could only call back the voodoo puppets and prepare to defend the temple. The shaman temple had quite a few barriers and voodoo techniques, as well as the altar. If they relied on the shaman temple to defend, the gnomes would not be able to break in so easily. Stop them. Use the breaking shaman talisman arrows. The gnomes clearly understood the shaman sorcerer's intentions, and the archers in the front pulled out a talisman. The moment the arrow left the hand, the elemental energy would activate the talisman. Each arrow had the power of a breaking shaman. When the voodoo puppets were hit by the gnomes' arrows, they immediately let out pitiful cries. Their bodies began to fall like building blocks, finally turning into rotten meat and squirming worms. There is no need to say, this was also Chu Tian's masterpiece. Chu Tian had taught the shaman witchcraft talisman arrays to the gnomes, and the gnomes had created these talisman arrows to deal with the shaman sorcerers. Talisman? Once the source energy array was activated and the arrows were shot into the voodoo puppet's body, the talisman would be destroyed. The talisman energy would sever the voodoo puppet's witchcraft connection, and the voodoo puppet would suffer a backlash from the curse power. It would immediately turn into mincemeat, and there would be no way for it to recover. Like this, the shaman sorcerers had been completely countered. Damn! Marzu was filled with rage as he muttered something. The corpses of the gnomes he had killed before all gathered above his head as if they had lost gravity. Countless limbs wrapped around each other, like a giant invisible hand was kneading dough into a ball, instantly turning it into a several-meter-wide meatball. Clark's expression changed when he saw this. Be careful. He is using a high-level shaman witchcraft. The meatball floating above Marzu's head gradually turned red before turning purple. Large amounts of poison seeped out, and the meatball expanded like it was filled with air. Finally, it was thrown at the gnome's area. Clark raised his long staff with both hands, and a green light was released. Great forest god, please bestow me strength. After saying that, the tip of the staff was inserted into the ground. Countless lush vines and branches rushed out and locked the meatball in midair like chains. These vines were filled with the green religion priest's power. Even if it was cut by wind blades, burned by flames, or smashed by boulders, they would not be able to harm it at all. However, they could only temporarily stop this terrifying witchcraft. When the emerald green vines touched the meatball, they immediately released a cursed power that corroded it, causing it to quickly wither. At this time, the meatball was already riddled with holes, and large amounts of poison was being released from it. There were cracks on the surface of the meatball, and it was clear that it was about to explode. The moment this huge meatball exploded, it was like a mighty sandstorm. Countless tiny pieces of minced meat splattered forward. Every piece of minced meat contained a witchcraft curse. As long as it splashed on any living creature, it would instantly fester and die. Forest barrier. Clark was already prepared and suddenly summoned a giant green barrier in front of him. Almost instantly, the green barrier was covered in a layer of dark red. Other than the countless pieces of meat, there were also large amounts of disgusting goo insects that were swimming around the barrier. The meatball exploded, and all the plants within several hundred meters were contaminated. With a speed visible to the naked eye, the poison fog that spread out formed a barrier, making it impossible for the gnomes to chase after them. As long as it was covered, all the plants would wither, and there would be all kinds of dangerous goo insects crawling over them. So powerful. Dolores saw this scene from afar. He is truly worthy of being the shaman's high priest. If this attack hit a place with a lot of people, perhaps it would kill over 1,000 people. Chu Tian was also a bit surprised. This shaman sorcerer from the savage highlands did have some skill. His cultivation was not lower than the fourth true spirit layer. Because his witchcraft was too hard to deal with, normal cultivators of the same level would find it hard to fight him. Mars's attack created a world for the shamans, and all the shamans immediately retreated into the temple. The green religion priests all made their moves. Countless vines and grass were injected with energy, wildly growing as if they were alive. They were like thick pythons that charged forward to attack, but they were a step too late. The sorcerers had already retreated, and the entrance to the shaman temple was protected by a barrier. The green religion priests had no way of directly opening it, so the countless vines could only wrap around the altar, making it hard for the people inside to come out. Marzu, your scheme has been completely exposed. Clark loudly shouted, "Don't needlessly attack us. You won't have another chance." The shaman sorcerers were trapped in the temple. Their faces were all like dead ashes. Even if they reacted slowly now, they would still understand what was going on. The shaman witchcraft had been broken by the gnomes, so the shaman plan could not be carried out. The shamans were trapped in the shaman temple, and although they could rely on the power of the temple to protect themselves, how could they stay here forever? The witchcraft that Mars had just cast was extremely powerful, but it had obviously consumed a lot of energy as well. At this moment, he was panting heavily, and his eyes were filled with frustration and anger. Hateful half-elf, hateful Clark. If I catch him, I'll torture him to death bit by bit with 10,000 wizard Gus. A green-skinned orc priest came over. High priest, the green religion priests have already sealed the temple, so we can't use witchcraft outside. What should we do now? Things have already reached this point. We can't just sit here and wait for death. Marzu said with a dark expression. First we'll use the altar to recover our strength, and then we'll kill our way out. We'll let them understand that the shaman sorcerers are not easy to deal with. Luz, you'll lead the charge in a bit. I'll cover you. Priest Luz thought about it for a few seconds. I have an idea that might be more beneficial to our situation. Marza looked at his assistant. Tell me about it. We can. Luz walked to Marzu's side and prepared to speak. A colorful large centipede came out of his sleeve and shot out like an arrow, biting the old troll's neck. Kill you, and then take your head to Green City. Marzu gave a pitiful cry. Chapter 844. The burning sword chi swept across the ground. Those dying evil eyes were all turned to ashes. The last remaining evil eye shook its huge head. Its consciousness felt a strong sense of danger, and it instinctively turned around and burrowed in a certain direction. Follow. The underground world was too complicated, and the gnomes could not understand it at all. Although this place was not far from the entrance to the demon's sin, even Clark and the others did not know what was hidden there. After around 40 minutes, the evil eye entered another cave. It should be here. Chu Tian had not passed through the cave when he felt a wave of pure star energy. After passing through the cave, there was a large basin in front of him, with meteor grass and other plants growing all over the ground. They were all at least level 3 meteor grass. This kind of quality not only needed tens of thousands of years to grow, it also needed a very good environment to grow. Chu Tian swung his sword to kill the unlucky evil eye, leading the way, and immediately began to search the area. This place is... The others were a bit stunned when they came in. This terrain did not seem like it was naturally formed. Rather, it seemed like it was formed in the ancient era by a giant force. In the rocks and on the ground, there were all kinds of materials that released starlight everywhere. Star iron. Chu Tian found a piece of iron covered in starlight. This is a high-purity star iron ore. This thing is the best material for high-level source energy arrays or high-level airships. I never thought that there would be this much here. If my guesses aren't wrong, this place was formed by a meteorite. There was also star silver and star gold here. They were all priceless top-quality materials. Ha, we struck it rich this time. Chu Tian found a few more pieces of crystal and found that the entire basin was covered in glowing crystals. Star crystals. There are actually star crystals all over the ground. Dolores and the gnomes looked at him with a strange gaze. Of course, they didn't know the value of these things. Star crystals were star crystals, also known as star stones. Chu Tian had picked them up in the Central State Trial Tower, and just a few small pieces were enough for a group of people to break through to the starlight immortal body. Now, there were star stones everywhere. Perhaps it couldn't be counted in pieces. It could be piled up in several mountains. This was simply a star mine. Star metal was an excellent material, and star crystal was even more precious. It could allow thousands or even tens of thousands of people to cultivate the starlight immortal body, and they would at least be able to cultivate the diamond body. The starlight immortal body was a non-attributed cultivation technique, and the starlight was a rare neutral energy, so even a member of the church like Dolores could cultivate it. Therefore, this mine had a large amount of value. With such a large amount of star crystals, how many top experts could be trained? The Central State Meteor Grass Basin was also formed by a meteorite, but the meteorite that created the basin had very little star crystals. When it hit the ground, it had already evaporated and only relied on the remaining energy to grow the meteor grass. This star pit was completely different. The meteorite shattered and buried a large amount of star crystals in the ground, forming a mine. Since there are this many star crystals, perhaps there is that thing. Chu Tian's expression changed, and he suddenly became a bit excited. Quickly look for it. Perhaps there's a top-quality treasure here. Once this thing is dug out, I can guarantee that not only will we become rich, the entire Green City will become a great weapon in 2-3 years. It will be enough to become one of the most influential cities in the Forest of Chaos. How could there be this kind of thing? Dolores had a look of disbelief. Could it be that we can dig out a divine weapon? What does a divine weapon count for? Even if we were given a divine weapon, will we be able to use it? Chu Tian rarely lost his calm as he anxiously said, "This thing can't be compared to 10 divine weapons." All right, don't waste words. Quickly find this thing. What kind of treasure had this much value? It couldn't even compare to 10 divine weapons. Clark gave a gentle cough. You have to tell us what kind of thing it is. Chu Tian didn't even have time to explain before the ground in front of him suddenly exploded. The rocks were shattered by some kind of power, and a majestic and vast energy rushed out, quickly condensing into form. Dolores cried out in shock. What kind of monster is this? The creature that broke out of the rocks was a 2-meter-tall giant. His body was covered in a strong electromagnetic halo, and he was bald. He was very strong, but he didn't have any facial features. This was not a physical creature, but rather an elemental life form. Star elemental. Chu Tian slightly knit his brows. Be careful. This fellow is very hard to deal with. Dolores threw out a bottle and used the demonic god priest summoning technique. With a roar, the 6-armed ape was summoned. It was also an incorporeal form of energy, and under Dolores's control, it charged at the star elemental. The 6-armed ape's 6 fists turned into a sky filled with fists, wildly slamming into the star elemental's body. A shocking scene occurred. When these fists hit the star elemental, it wasn't the star elemental that shattered, but rather the 6-armed ape's fists. It was like a drop of water hitting steel. The moment the 6-armed ape attacked the star elemental, its 6 arms were shattered. The power that was reflected turned into a fierce current of air that filled the entire space. The star elemental silently moved forward and slapped out with its palm. The 6-armed ape did not even have a chance to struggle, as its body was like water meeting high temperature, instantly disappearing without a trace. Dolores's expression turned very ugly. This is bad. Its destructive might is at least in the 4th true spirit layer, or even higher. We'll be done for if we're hit by it. Clark led the green religion priests to attack at the same time. Countless vines wrapped around the star elemental like a dumpling, but this attack had no meaning. The star elemental just shook its body, and the vines that could even wrap around a mammoth were all shattered into pieces. Clark already knew that this was bad. This monster's strength was much higher than they imagined. The star elemental raised its arm, and a storm of energy gathered in its palm. Clark quickly waved his hand and summoned a barrier that was covered in vines. Quickly run. Could they run? When the star elemental's arm swept out, A several dozen-meter-long blade of starlight instantly swept out, shattering Clark's defenses. That terrifying strength sent several people flying like they were pieces of paper, and almost everyone was injured. The star elemental's body turned into an electromagnetic beam, and with a few flickers, it directly rushed towards Clark. Although it didn't have any intelligence, it had instincts. It knew that Clark's cultivation was the highest, so he was the first target. This is bad. Clark's cultivation was not low, but he didn't have the strength to deal with this fellow. The star elemental used its powerful energy to form a protective shield around its body. Even an all-out attack would not be able to break it. The star elemental also had a terrifying destructive power that these people could not defend against. Bang! The star elemental's palm came. Clark raised his wooden staff to block. The terrifying energy formed a shockwave that instantly spread in all directions. The surrounding space was like an earthquake, constantly shattering as huge rocks fell down. Caca! Clark could clearly feel that the staff in his hand had cracks. He was almost unable to resist, but the star elemental's power was still getting stronger. Great Elder! Several green religion priests quickly joined hands, and several giant logs drilled out of the ground. Each log was covered in inscriptions, and they quickly wrapped around the star elemental's body. A powerful sealing power suppressed the star elemental. Since it would cause a backlash if it was attacked directly, they would use the sealing power to weaken it. But there was still no effect. The giant logs with the sealing power seemed like they were being burned by flames as they turned black. If this continued, the green religion priests wouldn't be able to hold on for long. There was no other way. If they didn't make a move, these fellows would all die. Chu Tian released a powerful aura, and a nine-eyed demon god appeared in the air. When Chu Tian raised the sword in his right hand, the nine-eyed demon god raised a jet-black demon god sword. Dolores was completely shocked by this power. Only now did she know that Chu Tian had hidden his strength. This power was actually this terrifying. Although he was only in the awakened soul realm, if he used his full strength, it would be enough to instantly kill a low-level true spirit cultivator. Die! Chu Tian stabbed at the star elemental. The star elemental was attacking Clark while being sealed by the green religion priests. Chu Tian's full-strength attack stabbed into the star elemental's body. Normally, this kind of attack would have no effect on an elemental being, but Chu Tian had already used the power of his source spirit. The moment Chu Tian stabbed out, the demon god's sword stabbed into the star elemental's body. The star elemental did not have a mouth and could not make a sound. However, everyone could clearly feel that there was an extremely mournful scream and wail reverberating in their minds. It was as if a detonator had been shoved into their brains, and it was enough to make everyone dizzy and knock their heads against each other. The star elemental's body quickly twisted. Like gas meeting an exhaust fan, the star essence condensed into a body of starlight, and it was all sucked into Chu Tian's body through the demon god's sword. It filled Chu Tian's meridians, muscles, and bones in an extremely short period of time. This vast amount of star energy almost made Chu Tian explode. Whether it was Clark or Dolores, it didn't matter. They all had a strange feeling that Chu Tian had turned into a black hole and swallowed the star elemental in one go. Swallowing effect? No, this strange ability seemed to be one of Chu Tian's many abilities. They could also feel various auras coming from Chu Tian, like his soul, his mind, his space, and his time. These people were all true spirit experts. They were all toppled at this moment. How is this possible? Chu Tian swallowed the star elemental and fell to the ground. Every pore on his body released starlight, and he could only barely support himself with his sword. Blood flowed from his nose and eyes. This was the side effect of his source spirit's backlash. Everyone did not even have time to let out a sigh of relief. There were suddenly several explosions coming from the distance. Clark's eyes almost popped out. There are still many star elemental. Dolores also saw that there wasn't just one star elemental here. There were many star elemental. There were a few that were very large, and their auras were several times that of the previous one. Quickly run. Clark did not even think as he threw out a vine to wrap around Chu Tian. wanting to quickly escape. Wait a minute. Chu Tian pointed at the place where the star elemental had been killed. From the slowly fading light, a strange gem flew out. We have to take this eye of the star. Dolores charged forward to grab the gem, and they quickly left this area. Fortunately, the star elemental did not seem interested in chasing. Otherwise, with their lightning-fast speed, they would not be able to escape no matter how fast they were. Chapter 845. Mars's cultivation was higher than Luz's, so this kind of sneak attack wouldn't work normally. But Marzu had consumed a lot of energy and was not on guard against Luz, so Luz's sneak attack was successful. Luz was a fierce and decisive person. Since he had decided to kill the high priest, of course he would not show any mercy. The seven-tailed centipede he had refined could kill anyone here with a single bite, but it could not kill this fellow in front of him. When the centipede bit Marzu, Luz's palms came out, slamming into Marzu's chest. Although the shaman sorcerer could not cultivate normal cultivation techniques, with Luz's true spirit realm cultivation, just releasing his spirit energy was enough to create a strong destructive might. Marzu's ribs shattered, and he spat out a large mouthful of blood. Like a broken glass person, he was instantly sent flying, slamming into an altar and causing the altar to cave in. High Priest! The shaman sorcerer's faces fell as they stared at Luz, who had sneak attacked Marzu. The shaman priests by Luz's side stood up, looking like they were blocking these sorcerers for Luz. A shaman priest roared out with a face filled with anger and confusion in front of a great enemy. What do you mean by this? What do I mean? I want to ask him what Marzu means by this. Luz walked forward with a gloomy expression. None of the shamans dared block him. Attack Green City? This is a method of mutual destruction, but you want to drive us into a pit of fire. Even if we win, what meaning does a ruined Green City have to us? Even if we win, can we withstand the anger of the eternal forest? The Savage Highlands are merely treating us as dispensable chess pieces. Could it be that you're willing to be manipulated like this? The shaman sorcerers had ugly expressions on their faces. Luz shouted, I have already discussed the conditions with the new Green City City Lord. As long as we leave the Savage Highlands, the shamans can still live here, and we will receive Green City's protection. Perhaps our influence will greatly decrease, but at least we will be free. The shaman religion was divided into two factions. One was the Highland shamans represented by Marzu, and the other was the Green City shamans represented by Luz. Both sides were in a standoff. Jia. A human figure came out of the hole in the altar. He had a head of white hair, and his body was covered in blood, looking like a terrifying demon. His skin was already festering, and there was poisonous blood flowing out. It was clear he was deeply poisoned. What a good traitor. Without a Highland religion, where would the Green City shamans come from? Today we'll eliminate you, traitor, and clean up our sect. The priest by Luz's side had a large change in expression. This old fellow had been hit by Luz's seven-tailed centipede and had taken 2 full force palms from Luz without any defenses, yet he didn't die. The high priest's strength was higher than most people imagined. Marzu saw Luz's ugly expression and immediately gave an insolent laugh. Are you surprised? You haven't learned all of the Highland shaman's methods. While he was speaking, Marzu spat out several bugs. Each one was as round as a leech, but they were not moving at all. Their bodies were purple and black, releasing a poisonous gas. Not long later, they turned into a pool of poisonous blood, corroding a large piece of the floor. The other shaman sorcerers instantly understood. The high priest had placed a voodoo in his body, and these voodoo bugs were parasitic in his body. When Luz's seven-tailed centipede bit the high priest, these voodoo bugs sucked away most of the voodoo curse and poison. Therefore, the high priest's injuries were not light, but they were not fatal. Luz felt this was bad, but he would not collapse. Luz was very clear on his seven-tailed centipede's strength. Although the high priest had dissolved most of the poison with his witchcraft, there was still a small portion left in his body. Adding in the injuries from Marzu's 2 palms, he would not be able to recover so easily. Then let me experience the Highland Shaman's witchcraft. Luz's source spirit was completely released. It was gray in color, and after condensing, it turned into a fierce-looking puppet. This puppet had small eyes and a mouth that reached the back of its ears. There were bugs drilling in its 7 orifices, making it look very fierce and terrifying. Each shaman source spirit was like this. This was similar to the giant shark gang members in the southern summer country. When the giant shark gang members were baptized by the sea race's inheritance, their source spirits would turn into giant sharks. When a shaman sorcerer became a shaman sorcerer, their source spirits would also change. It was this kind of sorcerer puppet. The shaman priest's witchcraft energy came from this source spirit puppet. Mars also released a sorcerer puppet. His source spirit was clearly stronger, and the sorcerer puppet instantly shot out a tooth from its finger. This tooth was not big. It looked like a human tooth. The surface was covered in witchcraft runes, and the sorcerer puppet's power shot out. Only a faint gray shadow could be seen. The tooth contained a fatal witchcraft energy, and Luz quickly dodged it. A shaman sorcerer, standing in a straight line, was hit instead of him, but it was like a drop of water falling on him. The tooth actually disappeared without a trace. Almost in the next second, the sorcerer gave a pitiful cry. He spat out a large mouthful of blood, or more accurately, he didn't spit it out, but rather escaped. Most of the blood in his body came out of his mouth, eyes, and nose. His eyeballs, brain, heart, and organs all turned into fragments. This shaman sorcerer instantly turned into a dried-up corpse as he fell to the ground. Luz's sleeve shook a few times, and 6-7 beetles came out of his palm, finally turning into a small ball the size of half a fist. This time, it was Mars' turn to quickly dodge. The insect ball Luz threw out exploded against the wall, and the entire shaman temple shook a few times. The insect ball sprayed out a large amount of blood, leaving a giant mark on the wall. Only SOSO. Mars gave a cold laugh. In terms of shaman witchcraft, although Luz was second to Mars, the difference in cultivation base was too large. This was not something that could be easily dealt with. Mars believed that he had at least a 70% chance of winning. There was no time. The 7-tailed centipede's poison was still spreading in his body. After Mars suppressed the poison, his face became darker and darker. The priest's robes on his body began to tremble without any wind, and a strong witchcraft energy leaked out of the 7 orifices of his source spirit, revolving around his body like a whirlwind. Everyone could feel Mars' intentions. He decided to use his witchcraft to take care of Luz in one go. But at this time, something that no one could have imagined happened. A vine suddenly pierced through the wall and instantly stabbed into Mars' back, coming out his chest. The blood-stained vine continued to stab into a pillar, and his heart and lungs were instantly torn apart. Mars was thrown into the air by a strong force. His eyes were wide open, and his face was filled with disbelief. How is this possible? How could the temple be broken so easily? When Mars saw that the vine had pierced through the wall, it was right in the middle of Luz's insect ball exploding blood. He suddenly understood something. The insect ball's target, perhaps it wasn't him. The blood that sprayed out contained a large amount of witchcraft energy. Just like strong acid splashing onto the wall, it quickly softened the temple's wall, finally corroding a large hole. At the same time, it weakened the temple's defenses from the inside. The gnome's vines had already wrapped the temple into a large dumpling, so they could definitely feel the defenses weakening. Clark had directly cut through the wall, killing the troublesome Mars in one move. Don't think you'll have an easy time even if I die. You'll all die with me. Mars' tall figure moved a few times, and his head of gray hair suddenly turned scarlet red. His skin was covered in small bumps, like there were many insects moving in his body. Moreover, there were more and more of them, becoming larger and larger. In just a few seconds, he had turned into a balloon filled with air. This is bad. He's going to self-destruct. Quickly run. The shaman sorcerers cried out in fear as they ran away. Mars' body released a thunderous sound, and the entire hall was covered in a layer of blood red. This was the power of Mars' lifetime of shaman power. and it contained an extremely powerful curse power. Some of the shaman sorcerers who were too slow were hit by it. Their bodies immediately went out of control, and like Mars, they swelled up and exploded like balloons, turning into a wave of blood-red energy. This energy splashed onto the bodies of the others and caused a huge explosion. This was no longer self-destructing. Mars had used one person to self-destruct to cause tens of people to explode. If this move was used in the center of the city, where there were the most people, it could probably blow up the entire city into a wasteland in minutes. Luz had just escaped with a small portion of the sorcerers, and the temple was already a sea of blood. Seeing this, Clark immediately raised his hand. Quickly seal the shaman temple. Don't let the power leak out. The green religion priests all made a move. Vines stacked on top of each other, finally forming a giant semicircle on the ground. The vines stacked on top of each other was several feet thick and contained a powerful sealing energy. Even if there was a strong explosion inside, this energy would not leak out even a bit. Strong, truly strong. Dolores patted her full chest. That old thing is truly sinister. It's a good thing we didn't participate in the battle. Otherwise, we would have suffered a large loss. The shaman high priest is dead and the battle is over. Let's go over. When Chu Tian brought Dolores over, the gnomes had already begun to clean up the battlefield. Luz and the several dozen surviving shaman sorcerers had been captured by the gnomes and were waiting to be dealt with. Luz immediately shouted when he saw Chu Tian, "Sir City Lord, I've already done as you said." Chu Tian waved his hand at the gnomes, indicating for them to be released. The gnomes, of course, did not immediately do this and first asked for Clark's opinion. Clark had no other choice. The gnomes could easily win mainly because of Chu Tian, so he could only wave his hand, let them go. Chu Tian threw the antidote to Luz. You made the right choice, and now in this battle without any benefits. I think you don't want all the shaman believers to die in this chaos. Luz repeatedly nodded. The shaman sorcerers had suffered heavy losses in this battle. Chapter 846. It can only be said that they were lucky this time. The star elementals did not have any intelligence. They only knew how to instinctively attack creatures that intruded into their territory. When the intruders left, they did not chase after them, allowing them to leave the underground world alive. Otherwise, with the star elemental speed, even if they couldn't kill them all, they could at least kill half of them. Chu Tian did not have time to explain. His body was filled with a vast amount of star energy, and if he did not quickly refine this energy, perhaps his body would explode at any moment. When he returned to the surface, he quickly went to a secluded valley in Green City. He sat down on a giant rock and began to cultivate. Each pore released the aura of star energy, and his body was covered in starlight, as if it could break out of his body at any moment. This situation was very dangerous, but it was a very good opportunity. The starlight energy was refined by the star elementals over countless years. The amount of energy he swallowed in an instant was not inferior to absorbing a ton of star crystals. Once this energy was refined, Chu Tian's starlight immortal body cultivation technique would reach another level. If it wasn't for the fact that he had cultivated the starlight immortal body, Chu Tian's body would have been tempered by the power of the stars for a long time, so he would have a high tolerance for the power of the stars. If it wasn't for the fact that the power of the stars was a pure energy without any attribute, it would be very gentle. Otherwise, with such a violent surge of energy directly pouring into his body, even if he didn't explode and die, he would probably be half crippled or severely disabled. It's starting. Chu Tian began to circulate his cultivation technique. The star energy stopped rampaging through his body and began to evenly distribute throughout his body. It slowly seeped into his skin, muscles, and bones, almost fusing with his body. Again and again, he began to refine himself. Chu Tian could clearly feel that his body was quickly being strengthened. Under the refinement of the star energy, each muscle was filled with endless vitality, and his body was 10 times stronger than before. Finally, The elemental energy accumulated in his body was completely turned into the starlight immortal body's power. The effects were immediate. Chu Tian could clearly feel the cultivation technique in his body becoming stronger. The starlight condensed on Chu Tian's body was no longer as transparent as a diamond, but rather it was emitting a glow from the inside out. It was like his entire body had turned into a person of light. It was so bright that it was a bit dazzling. The rock he was sitting on began to crack under the strong energy pressure, as if it was being crushed into powder. Chu Tian understood. He had succeeded. This state was the sacred light body that had achieved great success. The starlight immortal body cultivation techniques, 4 stages were the glass body, diamond body, sacred light body, and starlight body. The glass body was the small success stage. The diamond body was the proficient stage. The sacred light body was the large success stage, and the starlight body was the perfection stage. This meant that the cultivation technique had reached the perfection stage. Compared to the glass body, the diamond body not only had a large increase in defense, it also had a large increase in reflexes. Compared to the diamond body, the sacred light body not only had a larger increase in defense, the sacred light body's greatest effect was regeneration. Even if Chu Tian's internal organs were heavily injured, as long as he had spirit energy to activate the sacred light body, these injuries would quickly be healed. Other than that, the sacred light body also had a high resistance to curses, corrosion, demonization, and other strange attacks. Chu Tian's defense and battle strength had been increased by a large amount. In other words, when this starlight immortal body was cultivated to the large success sacred light body state, it was no longer a pure defensive cultivation technique. Rather, it was a cultivation technique with a strong healing ability. Even if he received a fatal injury, he could still be healed. However, the biggest surprise was not the increase in his cultivation technique. Along with the increase in his cultivation technique, Chu Tian could clearly feel his cultivation bottleneck loosen. This meant that the opportunity had finally arrived, and he could use it to attack the true spirit realm. How could he miss this good chance? Chu Tian quickly condensed his essence blood and began to charge towards a higher realm. Chu Tian had lived an extra life and had experienced this process before, so naturally he was familiar with it. He lifted it like it was light and steadily attacked the bottleneck. After 3 days, there was an earth-shattering sound coming from the valley. The spiritual energy in the surrounding several miles gathered, and it was like an invisible mouth swallowing all the spiritual energy. Finally, everything returned to normal. Chu Tian slowly opened his eyes, and his eyes shined with a glow that was as sharp as an eagle's. He let out a long sigh, and like a sword or a bolt of lightning, he instantly shattered the giant boulder in front of him. Success. True spirit realm. The true spirit realm was different from the awakened soul realm. The awakened soul realm was just developing the source spirit, and the true spirit realm was refining the spirit energy in the body into true spirit energy. When one reached the true spirit realm, their spirit energy would increase by a large amount with every increase in cultivation. Chu Tian had crossed an entire large realm, but he did not create any earth-shattering phenomenon. This was completely different from the past. It had to be known that around a year ago, when he broke through to the awakened soul realm in the Corpse Valley, it caused the entire world to tremble. Every time his cultivation increased several times, it created shocking phenomena. This was a large realm leap, but it was no different from a normal cultivator. Why was this? This was the benefit of reaching the true spirit realm. Chu Tian was completely different from before. He now had the ability to control his own strength. He could restrain his aura and prevent it from leaking, so naturally he could suppress the phenomenon. The awakened soul realm was divided into the void soul, illustrious soul, and true soul. The true spirit realm was also divided into the early, middle, and late stages. The first to third layer was the earth spirit realm, the fourth to sixth layer was the heaven spirit realm, and the seventh to ninth layer was the spirit transformation realm. Chu Tian was an earth spirit cultivator of the rank 1 true spirit, but with the perfection realm, netherworld flame sword, and the large success realm, starlight, immortal body. His strength was not something that ordinary cultivators of the same level could imagine, but if they thought that this was his only trump card, then they would be completely wrong. The true spirit realm could be considered a watershed. After Chu Tian reached the true spirit realm, he could now use the abilities that were hard to use. For example, spatial energy. The starting point of spatial energy was the true spirit realm, and if it was used in source energy arrays, the lowest level spatial source energy array was a level 3 array. This was also why Chu Tian wanted to recruit Vivian. It was because Chu Tian could not open the space warehouse in the awakened soul realm. Now it was good. From today onwards, he would open a new world. Chu Tian could feel that there was still some star elemental energy that had not been refined into his body. These remnant things were not abilities, but rather innately formed cultivation techniques. Chu Tian named them the Starlight Secret Art. This was a close combat and movement cultivation technique that could be cultivated together with the Starlight Immortal Body. The two of them had the same origin. This could make up for the weakness of the Starlight Immortal Body in terms of speed and attack power. Although it had limited value for Chu Tian in the future, if it was passed on to Ying and the young miss, it would greatly improve their battle strength. Even if it was a young miss who did not have any battle talent and source spirit, she would still have a decent battle strength. My harvest this time is too big. Chu Tian took out something from his chest. This was a stone similar to a star crystal, but it was different from normal star crystals. This star crystal had a picture of an eye, which released an ancient and mysterious aura. Eye of the star, an extremely precious material. The core of a large starlight meteorite. The core of the star elemental was this eye of the star. Chu Tian could even use this eye of the star in his hand to create another star elemental. Even if Chu Tian swallowed this eye of the star, his starlight immortal body could reach the perfection realm. This sounded very tempting, but Chu Tian would not do this. Chu Tian understood that this precious material had an even more important use, which was to mark space coordinates. It could be used as the core of a space gate. This eye of the star was not big. It couldn't be used to create a large space gate, but it was enough to create a space transfer array. The space transfer array and the space warehouse were two different things. The space warehouse was just a locked space, using the space as a foundation to transport materials, but the space could not hold life forms. The space transfer array was different. This was a kind of array that could transport life forms. In other words, Chu Tian could create a transfer array in Green City, and then he could create a transfer array anywhere on the continent. Using the eye of the star to mark the space coordinates, both sides could teleport. This was the value of the eye of the star. In this underground space, there seemed to be more than one eye of the star. If he could obtain a large amount of eyes of the star, Chu Tian could create transfer arrays all over the continent. In the future, it would be very convenient to transport people, and this would have an immeasurable effect on Green City's development. Chu Tian took back the eye of the star. The eye of the star was the core of the transfer array, but just the eye of the star was not enough. He still needed to find some precious spatial crystals. These spatial crystals were not as precious as the eye of the star, but as a rare spatial attributed material, it was not easy to collect them. However, the gnomes should have some in their research facility, so Chu Tian could borrow some to use first. When Chu Tian walked out of the valley, Dolores immediately came forward to greet him. "You came out this quickly?" Chu Tian shrugged his shoulders. "Of course, don't you know who I am?" Where did Clark and the others go?" The plague has suddenly broken out these past few days, infecting many gnomes in Green City. The gnomes have all gone to investigate. Plague? You still don't know? Actually, there has always been a plague in the forest, but most of the time, it was in the southern forest. It has recently been spread to Green City. Come, let's go take a look. There was something wrong with Green City. The entire city was covered in an indescribably strange atmosphere. Before Chu Tian came to Green City, the plague had already broken out in the southern forest. There were several local armies that had been completely wiped out, and large areas of the forest had been contaminated by the plague. The situation was quite serious, but it was only in the forest. He didn't know what was going on, but the plague had broken out in Green City. In just a few days, it had infected 40,000 people, and the situation could be said to be very dangerous. This really was seeing a living ghost. Chu Tian had used the tax exemption policy to keep the merchants, but now he had to run away on a large scale. Dolores said, "Sir Clark suspects it was done by the undead religion, and I think he has already brought people to the undead religion to demand an explanation. However, Clark does not have any evidence, and even if he did, he wouldn't be able to do anything to these necromancers." Chapter 847. Green City was a forest city, and the difference between a city and a tribe was that a city was a relatively open place. There were free markets and different races, just like the large and small towns in the forest. But the city's management was stricter and more formal. Only merchant caravans or adventurers recognized by the city could come in. Green City had been managed by the gnomes for 500 years. Now there were many merchant caravans, races, and influences that had obtained residency, shop opening, and business permits. The forest city's main income came from commerce and residency taxes, so outsiders made up a large portion of Green City's residents. This storm had caused an uproar in the city, so it was impossible for others not to know about it. In the taverns and hotels, the merchants, adventurers, and gnomes were all talking about this matter. "Hey fellows, do you know?" A gnome merchant said in an exaggerated manner. "Green City almost had a large battle yesterday." Another forest merchant nodded. That's right. Green City is too damn unsafe. Can we still properly do business here in the future?" It's said that the surrounding forest tribes are in chaos. "I think Green City is in danger, so it's better if we just leave as soon as possible. You can all be assured," a gnome in the tavern quickly explained. These merchant caravans were Green City's main source of income, so if they lost confidence in Green City, it would be a large loss to the gnomes. The crisis was caused by the shamans. Now that the shamans have been beaten half to death, they are no longer a threat. Another gnome said, "Green City has already released food to the forest tribes, relieving the danger of famine for the forest tribes. Although Green City has lost quite a bit of resources, I believe that after this, the surrounding forest tribes will be even more united. Even if there are enemies in the future, we will be able to unite against them." The forest merchants all had resentful looks on their faces. Who doesn't know that your Green City is on the verge of collapse? Even if you can pass this time, can you pass next time? At this time, an adventurer who knew the inside story asked, "That's right. I heard that the reason why Green City didn't suffer any large losses this time was all because of a mysterious human helping them. Otherwise, Green City would have to pay a large price to pass this crisis. How could they be unharmed like now?" "Is that true? Where did this human come from? He actually has this kind of ability. How come I've never heard of him before?" A gnome scratched his head and said, "My grandfather is a green religion priest, and he's seen this human before. I think he's called Chu Tian. Anyway, he's a human that's not even 20 years old." This name was indeed unfamiliar to the forest tribes. No one had ever heard of this kind of person moving around in the forest before, so they were very shocked that Chu Tian could solve this disaster for Green City. But it was clear that they were shocked a bit too early. At this time, an adventurer charged into the tavern. He was holding the notice given by the Green City gnomes and had a strange look on his face as he loudly shouted, "Damn, something big has happened. Quickly come and look at this. Hanson, what the hell are you doing? Could it be another war is about to break out?" The tavern was filled with clattering sounds as the merchants all stood up and immediately went to take the notice in the adventurer's hands. They didn't know if they didn't look, but when they saw the contents, everyone's eyes almost popped out. "What's written here?" A person anxiously shouted, "I don't know Elven language. Quickly read it out for me." "This is the latest news. The human's true identity has been revealed. He is the Green City Lord appointed by the Eternal Forest's Elven King." Fuck, is that true? The Elven King's brain must have been damaged. Everyone broke out in curses. Everyone knew that Green City couldn't hold on any longer, But they had received secret news that the Eternal Forest was prepared to take over, so they were able to stay calm until now. As long as Green City became a city under the Eternal Forest control, with the Elven military's increase, Green City would have a chance to prosper again. In the end, the Elven King took over, but he gave the city to the human. Wasn't this a joke? If the elves did not send an army, how could a foreign human stabilize the situation? There's still more. There's still more. Green City's acting city lord Clark has already resigned. After the Green Religion's priests' research, it has been decided that the human Chu Tian will be the acting city lord. This order will take effect immediately. The human Chu Tian has already moved into the main castle and has begun to take over the Gnome City's affairs. This really was a shocking piece of news. It was like a bomb exploding in their mouths. It made people unable to close their mouths. Was this a joke? It was fine if the Eternal Forest was messing around, but now the gnomes were messing around as well. There's some news that this human was the leader of a small power on the edge of the Forest of Chaos. It said that he was a merchant from a small company, but he came to Green City alone to be the city lord. Fuck, a brat still wet behind the ears. What qualifications does he have to be Green City's city lord? Fuck, the gnomes can't do it. Why don't Father do it? Is Green City finished? This time it wasn't just merchants and adventurers. It also caused a large stir among the gnomes. How could Sir Clark let a human take over as the city lord? This was just too unreasonable. Around half an hour ago, Chu Tian had just received his appointment. Although there was a problem with the plan, and he couldn't control the forest tribes, it didn't matter too much. The gnomes and shamans had a deep grudge against each other. The Green City shamans, led by Luz, could not gain the trust of the gnomes, and they could be retaliated against by the savage highlands. The most correct thing to do was to support Chu Tian as the city lord. This would ensure that the shamans would be protected by Green City and have a place to grow. The Minotaur Arnold also supported Chu Tian, and there was also the demonic god religion that Dolores belonged to. Chu Tian didn't have many cards he could use, but with this great merit, Clark still gave him the acting city lord position. Chu Tian brought Dolores to the city lord's castle. On the road, Dolores had a depressed expression. Hey, I've successfully taken the first step. Since I've obtained the acting city lord position, I'm not far from becoming the city lord. You've also been promoted to the city lord's assistant. Shouldn't we celebrate? Chu Tian shook the gorgeous city lord's robe that the gnomes had just made for him. For example, a passionate kiss. If it was normal times, Dolores wouldn't have suggested playing around with this human, but she wasn't in the mood right now. If this decision is announced now, it will definitely cause a large controversy among the gnomes. The Eternal Forest has appointed a human as the new city lord. This is a fact that no one can accept. Aren't you afraid of your subordinates rebelling? There was no denying it. Chu Tian was indeed a very capable human. In this conflict with the shaman sorcerers, if it wasn't for Chu Tian's skills, the gnomes would have suffered heavy losses. But he was still a human, and he hadn't fully matured yet. So now was not the time to reveal his identity. Chu Tian did not have his own influence in Green City, and the demonic god religion did not have much influence in Green City. Luz had only submitted to him due to pressure. As for the gnomes, there were a few old fellows that appreciated him, but most of the gnomes would not accept a human as the city lord. Their current method was to push Chu Tian into the heart of the struggle. It looked very glorious on the surface, but the water underneath was very deep. Chu Tian was a city lord with no followers. This identity was just a symbol. The authority was still in the gnomes' hands. Dolores said, I think the gnomes are purposely making trouble for you. You have done a large merit, and you have indeed been recognized by the Eternal Forest, as well as received orders from the Elven King. So the gnomes will not deal with you based on their personal feelings, but the gnomes are waiting for you to make a mistake. Chu Tian was just an acting city lord with his hands and feet tied. As long as he was not the true city lord, the gnomes still had some leeway. Green City's complicated situation would not be solved because of the shaman crisis. There were still many internal and external problems that needed to be solved. Once Chu Tian became the acting city lord, the situation would become even more complicated. If Chu Tian made a mistake or caused a loss, the gnomes could use this to ask the Eternal Forest to change the Elven King's orders and find an elven expert to hold down the fort. This gave Chu Tian a chance. This was also the gnomes' strategy of advancing and retreating. No matter how big Chu Tian's merit was, deep in the gnomes' hearts, they still didn't recognize his identity. They still had doubts about his ability and status. No matter, I liked the challenge. Chu Tian walked into the gorgeous city lord's castle and stood in front of a wide floor-to-ceiling window. The sunlight shined in from the outside, making the room very bright. When he looked outside, he could only see a vast expanse of white. When he opened a door, this was a natural little garden. The grass was soft, and there were hundreds of flowers blooming. There was a small river flowing through it, but it suddenly stopped at a cliff, turning into a silver waterfall that fell thousands of feet into the sky. The sea of clouds was like waves, with islands floating on top of them. These were the peaks of the mountain range. The city lord's castle Chu Tian was in the middle of the mountain range, being built on top of the mountain peak. From here, one could see the entire mountain range and the entire Green City area. The city lord's castle was very large. The entire castle had more than 100 floors. Looking at it from below, half of the majestic mountain had been transformed into a castle. The city and nature were perfectly integrated. It was like a work of art. The holy light shined through the dense treasure aura. The entire world was covered in a strong spiritual pressure. This was truly a rare paradise. Green City's location was very good, but it was a pity there weren't many people, so it was very deserted. But this situation wouldn't last long. As long as Miracle Commerce's headquarters moved here, Green City's influence would grow, finally becoming one of the most important cities in the Forest of Chaos. Chapter 848. The undead religion believed in the death god and the nether god. This was a very religious and mysterious sect. The ancient sects of the 10,000 Corpse ancient tomb were similar to the undead religion. The only difference was whether they had faith or not. No matter what, cultivators that dealt with ghosts and corpses, most people would stay away from them. When Green City was still prosperous in the past, the Lich had brought a large group of necromancers to Green City. They controlled tens of thousands of corpses. They were simply laborers that would never tire out. They made great contributions to the gnomes' construction of the city. It was because of this that the gnomes allowed the undead religion to build a temple to increase their followers. Who would have thought that the undead religion would become stronger and stronger, even faintly threatening the gnomes? Especially the plague outbreak this time. This was clearly the work of the undead religion. Clark led the gnomes to surround the undead temple so tightly that not even a drop of water could trickle through. The necropolis was a gray castle with a pointed arch. Many gargoyles were squatting around the castle like statues. They looked like decorations, but they were actually dangerous monsters of death. There were several circles of green protectors around the castle at this time. Several thousand gnome elites surrounded the entrance of the undead religion temple, currently confronting the necromancers. Both sides were ready to fight at any moment. Clark's face was filled with anger. "Samuel, do you really have to become enemies with Green City?" Hey. The leader of the necromancers gave a cold laugh. "Clark, Green City is no longer the gnomes. You should be very clear on this point. Even if we become enemies with Green City, what does it have to do with you? Have that turtle-like city lord come out. I really want to see what kind of person he is, actually making you gnomes shamelessly send a city to bow down to him." This person's words were very harsh. Chu Tian's brows jumped up as he revealed a look of dissatisfaction. Dolores whispered in his ear in a serious voice, "Samuel, an important priest of the undead religion temple. His strength isn't bad, around the third true spirit layer. He could be ranked in the top 5 of the necromancers here. Then why isn't he a lich?" Samuel was not a lich, rather he was a living person. Only his body was covered in bandages, and he was wearing a giant cloak, so people couldn't see his appearance at all, so they couldn't tell what race he was. "Do you think every necromancer is a lich?" Dolores rolled her eyes in annoyance. The Lich transformation is one of the top ceremonies of the undead religion. Only the most outstanding and powerful people have the qualifications to do it. However, people with these qualifications don't have physiques suitable for turning into a Lich. In the entire green religion, there's only the founder Lich, and it's said that he is an old monster that has lived for over 2,000 years, even older than the old elves in the eternal forest. An inferior existence like a Lich is worthy of this kind of praise. Chu Tian curled his lips in disdain. Your way of thinking is very hard to understand. Hey, what are you saying? Who doesn't envy a Lich? Dolores retorted. A Lich is immortal. Living forever is something many people dream of. There are many rulers of the continent that wish to become an immortal Lich, so I don't believe you don't want to live forever. The Lich in people's hearts was a very mysterious existence. This kind of undead monster was formed from a living being through a ceremony. So in theory, a Lich was an eternal existence. Your way of thinking is completely wrong. Chu Tian softly said, don't think that a Lich is that good. They don't breathe, they don't have a heartbeat, they don't have senses, they don't need to eat, and they don't need to reproduce. They are deprived of all the pleasures of life in exchange for an immortal body. So what meaning is there in that? They couldn't taste good food, they couldn't appreciate beauties, they couldn't enjoy the pleasure between men and women, and they couldn't appreciate the beauty of the world with their eyes. It was better to just die. You can't deny the benefits of being a Lich. A Lich is indeed almost immortal, but it's only almost. It's not truly immortal. What? Could it be that a Lich can still die? A Lich in theory has an unlimited lifespan, and there are some strong Lich that can extract their soul to make a phylactery. That way, even if their body is destroyed, they can still be reborn through the phylactery. However, a Lich's existence is not eternal. A Lich can escape the aging and destruction of their body, but they cannot escape the aging of their soul. There were many living beings and non-living beings in this world that were said to be immortal, like the flower fairies that Chu Tian met. These beings did not have an upper limit in theory, but the flower fairies were more fragile than most beings. They were very dependent on their environment, and if their environment was destroyed, it was hard for the flower fairies to survive. A living being's body, mind, and soul were all interdependent. Matter determined will and will determine soul. Without matter, the will would gradually become dull and finally lose its humanity, even losing its sense of self. The soul would also die in this process. Once a living being became a Lich, they had to use a secret method to simulate and maintain their emotions. However, this method could not be maintained forever. After living for 1,000 or 2,000 years, most Liches would become numb to their emotions. Their will would become colder and colder, and eventually they would completely lose their humanity and self-awareness. Their living instincts would weaken, and they would eventually become undead. Chu Tian knew how to transform a Lich, but he had no interest in this monster at all. These words attracted the attention of the surrounding people, and even the people from the Necromancer Temple looked over. Acting City Lord. The Acting City Lord is here. The gnomes discussed among themselves as they looked at the young human with strange gazes. Most of them were filled with doubt and distrust. Letting a human become the City Lord was a hard thing for the gnomes to accept. The plague in Green City had been very serious recently, and this so-called Acting City Lord had only appeared now. This was a bit unreasonable. I was wondering who it was that dared to talk about the Great Sir Lich. Samuel looked at Chu Tian with eyes filled with mockery and anger. Are the gnomes in a desperate situation? This kind of useless human can become the City Lord? It wouldn't be strange for this city to be destroyed. Dolores immediately asked, You're saying that you admit everything was caused by the necromancers? You still don't understand? This isn't important and isn't the main point. Samuel's eyes were filled with mockery. Those tens of thousands of gnomes infected by the plague, they won't live past 2 days. This is the main point. You're going too far. The gnomes were enraged. This matter was 100% the work of the necromancers. Samuel definitely had a reason for being this arrogant. That damn lich didn't show himself. So what use was there in killing these necromancer priests? The gnomes still couldn't solve the situation in front of them, not to mention that several tens of thousands of their clansmen were infected, which was equal to several tens of thousands of hostages in their hands. The gnomes couldn't ignore their clansmen, so they were bound to be threatened by these despicable necromancers. No matter what, they had to save their clansmen first. Clark couldn't help loudly asking, "What conditions do you have? Speak." If the gnomes want their clansmen to live, it's very simple. Give up the city lord position and let the great lich rule Green City. Otherwise, this small plague will just be the beginning. In your dreams, is the lich fit to rule Green City? A waste human can be your city lord, but the noble and knowledgeable Sir Lich can't? Clark, please understand this. I'm not joking with you. Think about the tens of thousands of clansmen struggling in pain. I swear that other than us necromancers, no one else has a way. Samuel pointed at Chu Tian. Of course, you have another choice. That is to kill this human and send his head to the eternal forest. Then you can rely on the Dragon's Ridge and be loyal to the Dragon's Ridge. Like this, your gnomes will still be the masters of this city. The undead religion will not be enemies with your green religion. Rather, they will become your strong allies. It was impossible for the lich to sit on the city lord's throne. It wasn't like the necromancer priests didn't know this. Samuel purposely made this request to pave the way for his second request. Kill Chu Tian. Cut off relations with the eternal forest. This was what the Dragon's Ridge wanted to see. The several tens of thousands of gnomes' lives were in the hands of the necromancers, so it shouldn't be a hard choice to make. After all, the gnomes did not like humans, so why would they give up the lives of their clansmen for a trivial human? You should know the stubborn nature of the eternal forest people. Samuel added oil to the fire. I think the Elven King not sending people to take over Green City is not because he doesn't care about Green City, but rather because he has no other choice. The elves do not like to be embroiled in disputes, and you choosing to rely on the eternal forest was wrong from the start. Now in front of you is a chance to correct your mistake. He pulled out the netherworld sword with a schwa sound. I think you've spoken a bit too much nonsense. Chu Tian raised his sword as he walked out. Do you want father to die that much? Then this Master Chu Tian will give you a chance. I'm standing right here, so kill me if you have the skills. Samuel said with a cold smile. You want me to make a move? Chu Tian laughed. If it wasn't for you being too annoying, I wouldn't even bother dirtying my sword. A wave of anger surged out of Samuel's body. He extended a withered twig-like finger and chanted. Suddenly, a strong stench of rotting flesh filled the surroundings, and a dark green fireball quickly expanded at the tip of his finger. Overestimating yourself, human. I'll let you see the might of the baleful corpse flame. This green ball of flame filled with the strong corpse stench landed at Chu Tian's feet. That strong smell that could make people want to vomit instantly spread out in all directions, making everyone else involuntarily move back. Green flames suddenly soared into the sky. Chu Tian did not make any movements and was instantly submerged by the flames. Dolores was shocked. It can't be. That fellow actually couldn't resist at all? The gnomes were also stunned. Although they already knew that this acting city lord wasn't strong, they never thought he would be this weak. He didn't even have a chance to resist? Samuel said with a cold smile, truly a joke. Who would have thought that at this time, a figure would walk out of the sea of flames? The raging flames had completely swallowed his body, and no one could feel any energy fluctuations coming from Chu Tian's body. What was strange was that the flames passed through his body, but they didn't cause any injuries. Not a single hair or a single corner of his body was injured. What happened? Everyone revealed looks of shock. Someone discovered a very strange phenomenon. Chu Tian's originally pitch-black eyes had turned white at this moment, and his entire body's aura had completely disappeared. He was standing here on the surface, but no one could feel his existence. If the high-level members of Miracle Commerce were here, they would recognize this cultivation technique. This was the spatial movement technique Chu Tian had taught Vivian, void escaping. Now Chu Tian could use it himself. Chapter 849. In the city lord's office, Chu Tian was sitting on a white jade throne inlaid with gems, holding a cup of tea that his assistant had just brewed. The water was good. It was the spring of life from the Green Religion Temple. The tea was also good. It was the elven race's green tea. His life was very comfortable. In front of Chu Tian was a person-tall mirror. The image went from blurry to clear, finally forming the image of a girl. Although she wasn't tall, she was slender and elegant. Her skin was as white as snow, and her figure was exquisite. She was big when she should be, thin when she should be, long when she should be, and round when she should be. She was filled with the vitality of youth. In short, she couldn't find any flaws. She took a closer look. This allowed Chu Tian to observe her cheeks up close. They were as smooth as porcelain. Her large eyes were as clear as crystal. Her nose was exquisite and straight. Her peachy lips were red, and her black hair draped over her shoulders. She looked obedient and beautiful. Chu Tian proudly shook his robe. How about it? I didn't lie to you. Why aren't you greeting Sir City Lord yet? Wah. Meng Yingying's eyes lit up and her mouth spat out a series of questions. Is this your office? It looks so luxurious. What's outside the window? Is it a garden? Why does it look like it's in the clouds? Did you really become the city lord? How did you do it this fast? Wouldn't you know if you came over to take a look? Chu Tian waved his hand like this small matter wasn't worth mentioning to him. How is Oldman's small town situation? Elder sister has already unified the surrounding locals and is now planning to build a commercial and industrial city. The initial plan is to hold 2 million people. This way Miracle Commerce will have large amounts of manpower to use. The new crystal oil mine has been successfully mined, and the scale is much larger than imagined, so we can start researching the new generation of source energy weapons. Vivian has developed the 4th space warehouse, and the flower fairies have created a stable spiritual space. Our cultivation bases have increased by a large amount, and also, not bad. No one was slacking off. Since everything is developing smoothly, then come over as soon as possible. I'm lacking people by my side and need the help of you and the young miss. All right. Meng Yingying revealed a look of joy. She had already wanted to go over. Yingying, are you communicating with Chu Tian? How come I can hear his voice? At this time, a very attractive female voice came from the side, and a tall beauty with a very hot figure appeared in the mirror. Who else could it be if it wasn't the young miss? Chu Tian immediately called out to the young miss. When Meng Qingwu saw Chu Tian sit on the city lord's throne, of course, she was very shocked. She never thought that Chu Tian would progress this fast. Chu Tian did not have anything to hide from the young miss, so he told her what had happened and the current situation. Like this, your position is not stable. We need a large amount of money to develop Green City. It's a good thing that Miracle Commerce's income has been increasing over the past few months, and we already have quite a bit of money in reserve. Meng Qingwu said without hesitation. If we don't count the value of other resources, Miracle Commerce has a total of 25,000 source stones. Now that the company's business is very large, we need to keep 5,000 low-grade source stones to use. The other 20,000 will be stored in the company's space warehouse. If you need money, you can use it at any time. I will quickly sell the resources and exchange them for more source stones for development. Miracle Commerce already had this much money. This number far surpassed Chu Tian's expectations. This was just the pure source stone reserves. If Miracle Commerce's stored resources were exchanged for source stones, it would be at least a single digit. Chu Tian was filled with confidence after understanding this. With the young miss as his wife, Chu Tian did not have any worries at all. There were clear footsteps coming from the hall. It was Dolores coming back. All right, let's not talk today. This city lord is going to start working hard. Chu Tian said this to the young miss and Yingying before closing the communication channel. He looked up. All kinds of scrolls, accounts, and notes were piled up in front of him like a small mountain. There were several hundred of them, and this completely stunned Chu Tian. What kind of mess was this? My dear Sir City Lord, what are you stunned for? The beautiful City Lord Assistant Dolores revealed a mischievous smile. This is only a small part. The 3 rooms next door are all filled with information the City Lord needs to see. Is there a mistake? How could there be this much? Think about it. The various tax bills, the merchant registration information, the city's people, the development of the city, the surrounding forest dynamics, the forest powers, the foreign relations, the research, the people's livelihood, the city's construction draft, the water project, the farming, the public security. All of this information is here. Do you think the City Lord gives orders? All right, we'll wait for the young miss to see this. Chu Tian wiped his sweat. He never thought that being the City Lord would be this troublesome. It was like a bucket of cold water was poured over him. What do I need to know now? How could there be a City Lord like this? Dolores secretly criticized him, but she still replied, Green City situation is not optimistic. The gnomes are already in a very high deficit. I've just looked at the recent year's expenditure, and it's actually 165% of the income. Of course, there were ways to greatly reduce the consumption of ordinary resources and materials, as well as the military budget. However, these were ultimately only a small part, and the proportion was less than a quarter. The main expenditure was the gnomes' welfare and the gnomes' research. This was the basic condition for the gnomes to join the Eternal Forest. The Elven King had also promised to protect them. Since he was appointed as the permanent City Lord of Green City, Chu Tian and Miracle Commerce naturally had the responsibility. Chu Tian never would have thought that after becoming the acting City Lord with great difficulty, he wouldn't get any benefits at all. Instead, he would have to support several 100,000 gnomes. This large pressure was enough to give him a headache. Clark is trying to make me back off, but these gnomes are looking down on me too much. Chu Tian thought about it and said, Go and issue my first order. When this City Lord is in office, the entire city will be exempt from all transaction taxes and business taxes. You're crazy. Dolores' eyes popped out. This is no different from cutting off an arm. The financial deficit is already serious enough. Do you think the hole isn't big enough? It's like you just said. Half of the merchants are preparing to run, and the other half are already on their way. What use is there in me stubbornly holding on to these taxes? Keep them here first, and there will be ways to make money from them in the future. As for the financial hole, reduce it as much as possible, and I'll make up for the rest. Chu Tian said with a face filled with disdain. Isn't it just 10,000 source stones? It's not like I can't afford it. Dolores knew that Chu Tian's background was not simple, but seeing Chu Tian's heroic spirit, not even placing a large sum in his eyes, she couldn't help looking at Chu Tian a bit higher. All right, it's fine as long as you feel there's no problem. Chu Tian did not care about the commotion he caused in Green City or the Forest of Chaos. He issued his first order like this. I'm very interested in the gnomes' research lab. Come, let's go take a look. Chu Tian's second matter was to understand the gnome situation. After all, the gnomes were rare high-level intellectuals in the forest, which was very compatible with miracle commerce. Green City had been built for an entire 500 years. The gnomes' research lab had been built for an entire 500 years. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.